This meeting will be recorded and would ask members that all mobile phones must be switched off as they interfere with the recording. Can I also remind anyone, there is none, so just remind you to tell members where appropriate as we proceed through the meeting. Apologies, we have an apology from Chris Hazard. Any others? Okay, Chair's business, just a couple of items that I want to just bring to your attention. In the written answer book this week in the Assembly, there are a number of tables referring to the allocation of early years places. I suggest that the overall Northern Ireland figure of 85% first choice allocations and 98% allocations for all parents engaged in the process are not always very meaningful at an individual school level. So what I would suggest is that we write to the Department to seek a table showing number of applications and number of allocations at individual early year settings for 11, 12, 12, 13 and 14, 15 when available. The committee could then see how successful the PEGs have been at increasing a number of places to meet the need and whether more could be done in this regard. There is a huge issue that is also raised in the paper or in the answers about the disparity between certain locations and part-time and full-time places. In my own Northampton constituency, you only have 200 and some part-time, full-time places, but yet 1,100 part-time. Whereas in some other places, it's not completely the reverse, but it's very high. So they show also a table apparently highlighting a significant variation in the level of full-time, part-time. So that we want to see if how we can get a reply to that. The Department advises that the exercise of assessing the implications of standardising patterns of attendance will not be complete until 15-16. So I'd suggest that we write to the Department and seek an explanation for this elongated timescale and for further details of the differing levels of cost per pupil for early years provision in different ELB areas. Happy enough? Yeah. Trevor?
Yeah, I'm happy enough for that, Chairman. But, I think the figures for this year wouldn't be anywhere near complete yet.
No, because we're in the and that's why we're saying when available. We would have, so that's their figures as they are at the moment.
Yeah. You won't really get them before recess.
No. Also, at our last, sorry, Sean.
Chair, and I think the other issue is too, particularly in rural areas, the alternative is maybe 10, 15 miles away.
Yes.
Which in the letter it will say, there are spaces available wherever, but it's totally unrealistic.
Okay, at our last meeting, reference was made to changes to the admissions criteria for early year settings as well, specifically the removal of the preferential allocations to children with July and August birthdays. The committee has asked when the rule in respect of the July-August birthday had been changed, and for members' information, the minutes show that the committee considered and agreed the relevant statutory rule in June 2012. We have no more.
It was just Chair. I think members had asked. Well, I couldn't find any record of it at the time of when this had been considered by the Assembly, but no, it had all happened, and the committee had looked at it, and it was actually just before my time as clerk, which is why I couldn't remember it. Okay. It was June 2012. So.
Yep. Okay. There's a conference in St Mary's Training College that I've been asked to address on the 14th of June. May? Sorry, even of May. I can't even read what's in front of me. So if the committee's content for me to do this as chair, and hopefully I can prevail on the deputy chair to chair at least the first part of the education committee on that date.
Yep, that's all right.
Thank you. The draft minutes of the previous meeting of the 9th of April are at pages 6 to 11 in the pack. Agreed? Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, then we'll move to the first presentation, which is the visually impaired school children and a briefing from the Department and the ELBs. You'll recall that following briefings from charities working with visually impaired children, we agreed to revisit the issues relating to education and health overlaps and the interagency connectedness. So today, our focus is on the access to health services by visually impaired school children and our first briefings from the Department and the representatives from the ELBs. The clerk's cover note at pages 15 to 24, and you'll find a briefing paper from the Department at page 26. Other supporting correspondence from the Department, DEL, Department of Health, ELBs has been included for information. I think maybe we should say before the witnesses come in that this is the beginning of us looking at this issue. Next week you'll see in the Forward Work programme we're going to be looking at the issue of psychology services and speech and language. So it is all around us trying to focus in on the interface between the two departments, and I think it's good that we have this committee and the Health Committee, and we should try to work together to ensure that we get a good outcome in terms of information collated and recommendations that we can make. So can I welcome to the committee Caroline Gillan, Director of Access, Inclusion and Wellbeing at the Department, Ruth Bell, Assistant Senior Education Officer, Children and Young People Services for the SELB and the Western Education Library Board, Stephen Porter, Regional Vision Resource Base, and Margaret McMullen, Learning and Support Services at the Western Education Library Board. You're all very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come and see us this morning. And Caroline, I'm going to ask you to lead off. And if there's any other comments from the members of the panel, please feel free to make your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting us here today to provide a briefing to you. You'll hopefully have received the Department's written briefing paper on the support that's available to pupils with a visual impairment, and I intend to highlight some of the key points from that paper now. And I'm sure that during members' questioning that my colleagues from the boards will be able to provide further detail of what actually happens on the ground. So I'd like to begin by explaining that the aim behind all of our efforts in relation to pupils with a visual impairment is to reduce barriers to accessing a full and balanced curriculum and enabling these children and young people to achieve their full potential. And the support that's provided is delivered within the context of the overall SEN framework, with statutory responsibility for securing provision resting with both schools and the education and library boards, who are responsible for identifying, assessing and, where appropriate, making the provision. Children and young people with a visual impairment receive board support from birth to school leaving age, with visual impairment services available in each board area. And these services are generally provided by a qualified teacher of the visually impaired who has relevant training and experience on the area of visual impairment. And children are supported in accordance with agreed regional guidelines, and my colleagues will be able to go into these in further detail today. Children of preschool age would be visited at home, creche or playgroup, and then obviously school-age children are visited at school, and the support also extends to parents and teachers. So, as I said, board colleagues will be able to give more detail about the particular supports and the methods for referral. In recent years, we also have the Regional Vision Resource Base, and that has provided a very effective service, and Stephen heads up that base, in terms of enhancing pupils' access to the curriculum and independent learning. And of course, we also have the Jordanstown Special School, which specialises for support for pupils with sensory impairment. As the committee will be aware through previous briefings on SEN, the boards and the department are committed to a policy of inclusion, which results in the majority of children being educated in mainstream schools. Many pupils with visual impairment are educated in mainstream schools and would be supported by school staff with assistance from the qualified teachers, the VI services in each of the board areas. Those with a more severe visual impairment may require a statement. Now, close collaboration between the board's VI services and health professionals is important and is ongoing from the date of assessment, often right through to the completion of the young person's education career. And the qualified teachers of the visually impaired and health staff often carry out joint visits to homes and schools. And within the school visits, consideration would be given as to what adaptations may be required to the school environment. And if work is required, this would be taken forward, usually under a minor works piece of work. The QTVIs, the qualified teachers of the visually impaired, also attend low vision clinics that are organised by health trusts, and this allows them to gain valuable information with regards to the pupil's vision and any educational issues that might arise. You may be aware that ETI assessed the provision for pupils with visual impairment in mainstream schools and the support offered by boards in 2012, and both were reported as very good. And in particular, the knowledge and expertise, supports and advice of teachers, the QTVIs, was evaluated as outstanding. The report found that pupils with a VI in most instances were making good progress in terms of the curriculum and in developing their capacity to adapt to the difficulties posed by their visual impairment. It did identify a number of areas where there was some room for improvement, particularly in relation to training and communication, and these are being taken forward by the boards and almost complete. In parallel to those forms of support, the Department also has its capacity building programme in the context of the SEN review, and we have produced a SEN resource file that's been distributed to all schools, and it has a particular chapter on visual impairment with straightforward advice to teachers on steps that they might take to support pupils. And our intention is that we would keep this resource file updated based on feedback from teachers and others, and to keep on top of good practice. Just briefly to return to the Regional Vision Resource Base, as I said, it came into operation in 2011, and it's probably unusual for me to speak about it when Stephen's sitting here beside me, but I just wanted to emphasise the value that the department places on that base and the work that it's done so far in supporting pupils right across all 5 board areas. The department has earmarked nearly £1 million of funding for the base since it opened, and that includes 210,000 in this current financial year. That tends to be the yearly allocation for the base. The purpose of the base, and Stephen can explain further later on, is the production of textbooks, study resources in various formats to meet the needs of pupils with visual impairment and to allow them to become independent and effective learners. It also has an important role in raising awareness amongst teachers of the needs of the visually impaired and how the latest technologies might work. They have been running, on the subject of latest technologies, they have been running an iPad pilot project. It's in its 2nd year of operation, looking at how the iPad could be used to enhance the learning experience. The pilot will be assessed, and then obviously dependent upon the results, decisions can be taken on whether it can be exploited further. I want to just touch on also briefly the issue of transition, and I know the committee's written to the department over the past year on this issue. This is obviously particularly important for any child with SEN, including if a child has a visual impairment. And there are a lot of agencies involved in the transition process, especially when the child moves from education into either work or further education. And that includes, obviously health and education, further education, the careers sector. The boards are responsible for developing a transition plan for all pupils with a statement at the first and then subsequent annual reviews of the statement following the pupil's 14th birthday. And the department helps to facilitate this process by providing funding for 2 transitions coordinators in each board area. It's roughly 600,000 a year. And these staff play an important role. These coordinators try to pull all the relevant contacts together and make contacts for the pupil and their family. There's been a key improvement in this area that has helped pupils with visual impairment particularly, and that's the attendance of the qualified teachers of the visually impaired at the transitions review meetings. And in some cases, and Margaret will be able to go into more detail, in some cases the QTVI would even make contact then with, for example, an FE college in particular circumstances. I'd just also like to mention briefly the RNIB's vision strategy. The department is a member of the steering group for the vision strategy alongside colleagues with other departments and agencies. We have been very supportive of the strategy and the work to implement the actions identified in the report, and that is ongoing. I'm not sure what the committee's original request for briefing referred to pupils' access to health services. I'm not sure if it was on the latest agenda item. I'm not sure that health services is particularly mentioned on the agenda for today, but I thought it might be helpful just to touch on some of the partnership working between health and education, because there is such an interplay there, both at the strategic level and at the operational level. In terms of the strategic, the department itself has a lot of cross-departmental working with health. Our senior officials meet health and indeed DEL on a regular basis to discuss issues that arise of common concern or areas where the departments need to work together, and that's very helpful for them. We also participate on various cross-departmental groups on particular issues like the autism strategy or Bamford, and more recently on a transitions focus group, which is looking at areas for improvement in the transitions process with a view to making proposals to ministers. At the board and trust level, cooperation can be seen right through the statutory assessment process and the transitions process, as I mentioned, and indeed the contribution by the qualified teachers for the visually impaired and educational psychologists often in the health run clinics for visual impairment. But of course, cross-departmental, cross-sectoral working is always a challenge, and that's not to say that there's not scope for more improvement and more consistency across all areas. So to conclude, as I said at the beginning, our efforts are all aimed at reducing barriers for pupils with visual impairment to ensure that they access the curriculum, can fulfil their full potential, and whether that takes place in mainstream school or in a learning support centre or in a special school, the key is that the individual learning needs of each child are paramount. We feel that there's been good progress in recent years to support children with visual impairment, and if we can continue to improve the effectiveness of that, of the services, then those children will have an even greater opportunity to achieve to their full potential. Thank you.
Caroline. Difficult we always find when we come to these issues is where do you start? Because there has been so many recommendations, inquiries, plans, strategies. We had the RNIB UK Vision Strategy was launched in 2008. The Vision Strategy Implementation Group Northern Ireland had 6 priorities. This was then taken forward by the Priority Action Group, 3 which included the steering group, the department and the ELBs. Then we had obviously the work of the Regional Vision Resource Base, exploring with ETI how to support the Vision Strategy. When all that was going on, we then back in February of last year, so well over a year ago, we had looked at this issue, and one organisation wrote to the committee indicating that the Priority Action Group had made little progress. So as a result of that, when that was raised, the department then advised us that that Priority Action Group had been stood down, and that the Vision Strategy for 13-16 will be taken forward by the Vision Strategy Steering Group, which had everybody on board, just a raft of organisations, and it again had an action plan. Can't do anything without an action plan. However, when all of that was going on, another year goes on, we get further information, and basically the RNIB organisation, Angel Eyes, Guide Dogs for Northern Ireland, the Jordanstown School, briefed the committee back in July of last year on the services for children with visual impairment. And they contended that the support for children with visual impairment was wrongly focused on adult care for generally disability rather than sensory disability. Right. Now then we ended up in a whole contest between the trust questioned the analysis that was given. There was a whole, oh no, that's definitely not the case. Caroline, where are we at? And do we really know that if there is a child who has a visual impairment at whatever stage in its progress, birth, P1, P4, P7, first year, third year, because it can happen at any time during that. This doesn't just happen when a child is born. It can happen at any time. How do I know, if I was a parent,
Yeah.
how do I know where to go to,
Yeah.
who can help, and is the help there?
Well, I appreciate, for parents, the presence of action plans and strategies
that's-
doesn't mean the same as actually knowing what happens on the ground. And it might be helpful if perhaps Margaret could speak about practically what happens in a case where referrals are made or a child is diagnosed.
As soon as a child is referred to our service, the first point of contact is with the parent. We write directly to the parents and we inform them that the child has been referred through to our service, and we seek their consent to support the child within the school setting or the home setting or the early year setting, wherever it may be. So from a very point of referral to the service, we are linking with parents.
Yes. Now, Mark, can I just stop you and ask you, who makes the referral? So, in the first case, who identifies the problem?
And it would be the ophthalmologist or the orthoptist. We get our referrals through a medical route.
Okay. Now, and I'm sorry but I want to be clear and understand this. And please don't think I'm not being difficult here.
Yeah.
When a child sitting in a classroom, is it the teacher who refers them to the person who has the medical expertise to say that child needs being referred to the learning support service? Or is it the school themselves because they believe there is a problem?
It works both ways. In some instances, in the majority of instances, we would know about the child's visual impairment before they start school.
Okay.
So the school, we
In the
would have
majority
school
of cases?
In the majority of cases. In a small minority of cases where maybe the information hasn't been passed through to the vision support service, the schools may say to the vision support teacher when he or she is in the school, I have a child in my class, I'm concerned about them, they seem to have difficulty reading information from the blackboard or whatever, could you maybe do something about this? So what we will do in that instance is we will contact the parents and ask for their permission to contact the low vision clinic or the ophthalmologist or whoever to request the medical information, so that then we can go in and provide the appropriate advice to the school based on that. So the schools can indicate that they have concerns about the child.
Two things in relation to that, and then we'll move to members, because there's a considerable degree of interest in this issue, and I suspect that this element of our inquiry will take on a life of its own over the next number of months. Does the department and the ELBs, through the Learn Support Service and so on, do they or have they an estimate of the level of unsatisfied demand that there is for services for children who are visually impaired? And secondly, are the low vision clinics oversubscribed, and is there a waiting list? Because if it's the same as any other service, psychology service, and we're going to look at that next week, or if schools only allowed 2 referrals, maybe in a term, and you get 15 children sitting needing the service, is that the same for children who have visual impairment?
No. I'm not aware of a level of dissatisfaction within schools in terms of the level of support that schools receive from the vision support teachers. In actual fact, we're in the process of sending out an evaluation to schools to evaluate a number of learning support services, including the VI service. And the feedback we get from schools is very, very much appreciated, and that's evident within the ETI report as well, where it's saying that the work of the VI staff is outstanding. In terms of the low vision clinics, I couldn't comment on that in terms of
That's a trust issue.
Yeah, that's a health issue.
We can make inquiries from the trust in relation to that. Thank you.
Perhaps I could give an anecdotal
Yes, Stephen, thank you.
example that I do think that there is not an issue sort of in support from low vision to children in education, in that I was supporting a pupil in the Belfast board, and in discussion with the SENCO and mum, we thought that the child could do with a low vision aid of a bar magnifier. And literally within hours of mum leaving the meeting, phoning Low Vision Clinic and saying the QTVI has said that it might be worth looking at this. An appointment was given within 4 days, and the child received 2 magnification devices for use in school and for carrying home. So there is that open level of communication. So on the ground, those issues do happen, and I think the evidence would be that there is a good sort of working thing. I think also the important thing that people don't realise, as well as a practising qualified teacher is visually impaired, it is actually important when a referral comes to us. We are not medical people, we are teachers. So therefore, it is very important that we actually have contact and support with a child once we're in receipt of medical evidence and medical evidence that shows that the child does have a visual impairment. There are visual impairments that are obvious, like my own. You wouldn't know that a child didn't have albinism. But if there's a sudden onset of visual loss and the school is concerned, it's important that the QTVI has access to the medical information before going in. Because we could inadvertently go in, do some work with a child and say, oh, he is reading that print. There isn't an issue.
Yes.
But 3 months down the
Yes.
line, a GP discovers that the child has a brain tumour.
Yeah.
And it's things like that. So therefore, it's important that the QTVI never gives comment and advice on either the presence or lack of presence of a visual impairment. We need to go within the bounds of following medical advice, and that is why one of the reasons why we wouldn't enter a school without having received information from medical people. One of the issues that does come up is some parents don't want medical advice being looked at by people who are not medical, and you can get a catch-22 situation
Yes.
where a parent says, I want support, but I don't want you to see what the doctor said. And therefore we're in a situation where I think to keep us legally right, we really can't say we can't actually see the child until we have that medical evidence. There is also, and this is just a personal thing of observation, I think we need to bear in mind is, and I think we need to go back and just remember what the statutory definition of what partially sighted is and what blindness is, because there is a legal definition of what the level of vision has to be to declare someone to be partially sighted and someone to be blind, because there is a blurring, and yes, the QTVIs will support young people with nystagmus. We will give some advice with a child who's got monocular vision, which is vision just in one eye. But if you've got normal vision within the other eye, you're not considered by the state to actually have a visual impairment, if one eye is correct, sort of thing. So there is a bit of a blurring at the minute where people are sort of looking at that group who aren't necessarily described as being, who wouldn't be partially sighted by definition. And there is an issue about what level of support, and therefore that wouldn't kick in support from social services rehabilitation work because they wouldn't be partially sighted. There is also actually the issue that if someone has got low vision of 660 and they are registered blind, that's quite straightforward, but there is this area of registration of a partially sighted person, be it a child or an adult. And registration of partially sighted is not compulsory in the same way that being registered blind is. So therefore parents do sort of have this sign at time, if they've got a child born with visual impairment, do I register them as partially sighted? Do I not? It's always historically been that the option is open. And because actually in registering as partially sighted, there isn't really much access to other benefits and other things. Some parents don't think it's necessary, but if the child hasn't been registered as partially sighted, that then means that they won't have access to social services input, and therefore they won't have a social worker, and then the knock-on effect is rehabilitation comes through that side as well, so there won't be access to rehabilitation services until an issue arises. And I think that's some of the complexities going on right back to definition from birth and diagnosis and registration, and it's a big wide issue which is beyond education into health and social services and everything. If that puts a little bit of light.
Well,
on
I think that's
the
extremely useful, Stephen, because I think it gives a very good context. In light of that, do you think, and again, it may only be your personal view, and I'm not asking you to, but do you think that the current legislation is a restriction on identifying and helping particular elements of young people, children and young people who have a visual impairment?
I think the legislation on registration, particularly for partially sighted children, it is an issue, and to be honest, it's been an issue since 1964, in the year that I was born, sort of thing.
Like myself.
There is
a good year.
Some would say. And it always has been a hindrance, and it is this debate: do I want to register as partially sighted? And sort of speaking not professionally but personally. I'm sure anybody in the observation gallery would agree who's got a visual impairment. When you're partially sighted, you do actually want to spend most of your life actually pretending that you don't have a disability. And lots of our young people will be the same. And having gone through the school system myself, I know sort of thing, even when I applied for my first job and the equality stuff comes out and you tick, do you have a disability? I think the first teaching job I actually ticked no. Because you didn't want to sort of be recognised. So there's all of that going on. There's a whole sociological look into it as well, which I think sort of complicates the issue as well.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Stephen. Jonathan?
Yep. Thanks, Chair. Caroline, I find it fascinating, because you're painting a very nice picture here about how the strategies there, the groups there, you're working with health, you're working with everybody else, and everything's going fine and dandy. But I also note here in your report that you talk about the need and the importance here for actually educating teachers. Mm-hmm. You actually go on, because I think it's fascinating to see that you're running training courses for parents regarding the rights of their children. What are your concerns about the training of teachers? And there must be concerns, or why would you be running a course to actually educate parents in their rights?
Well, I think capacity building training, that's an essential part of what we do. If I came here on another day, and indeed we're here next week to talk about SEN issues, I'm quite sure you would criticise the department for not rolling out capacity building and training. So I don't think by running courses that's an admission of something being wrong. The ETI report did talk about communication and training being an important issue, and the boards have been responding to that, and perhaps Ruth could actually explain a little bit more the responsibility of the boards to provide the training and the awareness raising.
Clearly, the role of the Special Educational Needs Coordinator is a very important role in this regard, and we have SENCOs, as they're known in schools, changing on a regular basis. We have people moving on to different posts, we have new teachers coming on board. So the capacity building around special educational needs is essential, and we believe it's something that needs to take place on an ongoing basis. And Children and Young People Services across the 5 boards are currently involved in the Leadership Management Programme funded by the Department to consolidate the knowledge and expertise of our SENCOs. So that is something that we consider as a priority for us, to continually enhance the professional development of our teachers and our SENCOs, and to support through learning support services in each of the boards. So that's a priority for us all of the time, and will continue to be.
Do you feel there is an issue around this here, especially partially sighted and sighted? Is there an issue with the training of teachers in general?
Wait, I don't feel that there is, Jonathan. When children, probably the reason that was put in there is when children transition from a nursery setting to a primary setting, or transition from primary to post-primary, we would see it very much as part of our role to go in and deliver training to the staff of that school who are receiving that child, so that they are informed about the child's visual condition, about the implication for their learning, and about what they can do within their classroom teaching to facilitate that child. So it's very much part of the work of what we do. And as Ruth has said, capacity building it's a big element of our work, and it's about making sure that the staff who are in contact with this child know about their visual condition and how it affects their learning, and what they need to do within the classroom setting to facilitate the child's learning.
Do you feel that is universal across all of the education boards?
I do. I would say that the teachers, the QTVIs, are very committed to meeting the needs of the children in the schools, and they will deliver that training, and it will be offered to schools. And when we go to post-primary schools, some post-primary schools will accept the training for Year 8 teachers in the first instance, and then as new staff meet the child, then will receive the training for those staff at that time. So I do feel that it is.
I accept that. You feel that at this point in time, it's there. How long has this been implemented?
I've been on the board since 93, 94, and I've been delivering training to schools since then. And since that time, boards then have been employing QTVI staff. So all of the 5 boards now have qualified teachers for the visually impaired who will go out into mainstream schools. So,
in preparing for this appearance today, we were discussing between ourselves. The visually impaired services, we were saying, actually, out of a lot of services across the boards, it does work well together. There are agreed guidelines, and there is good relationships between the services in each of the board areas.
I think as well through the regional strategy group for special educational needs, there are a number of subgroups, and there is a sensory support subgroup that the QTVIs meet. Margaret chairs that particular group, so that gives the opportunity to the QTVIs on a regular basis to meet, to explore best practice, to enhance provision and to discuss any issues that may be arising. So we're very pleased with the developments in that area.
See, Chair, I don't want to cut across you here, but I find this all fascinating because time and time again we get people coming to the committee, Chair, and we're all painted a wonderful picture of how everything is fine and dandy out there. I'm sorry, but my neighbour's child is partially sighted, and her experience contradicts just about everything you have said here this morning. When that child went into its first primary school classroom, they were put at the very back of the class by the teacher, and then when there was difficulties with the learning, the parents were told off. Once they explained, and all of the medical documentation had been handed to the school, once they explained the situation, he was actually moved beside the window, which actually made the situation worse for the child. And only after the intervention of the parents on several occasions was the whole issue taken seriously. That's why I'm asking you. I find it interesting that you're now training parents in their rights, which leads me to believe that everything is not as fine and dandy as you're making out here.
Could I make some comments on the training? It's just, as a qualified teacher of the visually impaired who is actually working on the ground, there are 10 qualified teachers of visually impaired working across the 5 boards. 4 of the boards, Southern, Western, South Eastern and Belfast, have two qualified teachers, the visually impaired, working for them. North Eastern Board is supported by the Outreach Support Service from Jordanstown. One of our main remits, and say, Trevor, I don't know about your constituents and sort of what was going on, but as a qualified teacher of the visually impaired, when a child enters primary school, enters nursery or enters post-primary, this term is what we call our transition term. And the first thing that we would be doing would be contacting the SENCO of the school that the child is about to enter, be it nursery, primary or post-primary. And we'd be setting up a meeting between the qualified teachers of visually impaired. I am quite concerned to hear the evidence of that, because one of the first things that we've begun to do is saying, and sitting down with the SENCO and saying, these are the things that need to be in place come September for this child coming into your school. And the advice would be sort of seating. A risk assessment would be conducted between the QTVI and members of the board staff. If that's the BELB, we have a risk assessment team which is based out of the Mitchell House Special School, and also health and safety within BELB and the qualified teachers of visually impaired. And every child entering a school in Belfast this September, a risk assessment will be carried out this term in the presence of the parent and the child, where we will look at the needs of the child. And the SENCO, and if it's a primary school, the receiving teacher of the child, will be spending time with this qualified teacher of the visually impaired, being advised what are the issues that will face that child. And one of the first things actually would be seating and preferential seating, and also coping with glare and photophobia and where light is. And that's actually part and parcel of our tick list. I must have. If what you're saying is true, I'm horrified as well. And if I was the manager person for it, I would be horrified. How has the child got into school and not got through without that
And perhaps, I
information
mean,
being passed?
it's difficult to discuss and not really appropriate to discuss specific cases. But if you want to provide information, to ensure, to check that if there is something that hasn't not going right, if the processes aren't
Stephen,
working in a particular area.
Can I just clarify, and John, sorry for interrupting, but Steve, you say the SENCO would initiate that process.
No.
Caroline earlier on said that the responsibility, ELBs have the responsibility for identifying the needs.
Yes, but within the school,
Yes,
it's
within the school.
It's the SENCO,
Schools and ELBs.
the qualified teacher per teacher will meet with. And it is us, it's us that will alert the school they have got a child with visual impairment.
But if they haven't had a medical diagnosis, how does that marry up with your comment earlier in relation to ensuring that the teacher is protected because they don't have medical expertise? Are we saying that the Senkos have the medical expertise?
No. The
because
Senkos
we know
go
they
on
don't.
our advice. But once you have the medical evidence, then that's when you know that the child is visually impaired, and that would sort of kick in. I think one of the things too, and when talking about training for teachers and the issue, the training issue as a whole, the one thing we have to bear in mind here is that visual impairment is a low incidence disability. No, it is an issue, and we all wouldn't be here if it wasn't an issue. And one of the problems, and it actually has grown over the last 30 years with inclusion. And inclusion is the way forward, and I believe in inclusion and follow inclusion. But the one thing that inclusion did do was it removed children with various disabilities out of special schools. And what was the one thing that a teacher in special school had? And that was, if you take Jordanstown as the example, year in, year out, you were teaching children with albinism. You may have had 3 children with albinism in your class each year. And over the year, you were building a bank of knowledge and understanding of how to cope with that disability. Now, in general, because visual impairment is a low incidence disability, in an average teaching career, a teacher may actually only come into contact with one child with one visual impairment in their whole teaching career. And the other thing about as well being a low incidence disability, each visual impairment, be it glaucoma, albinism, retinopathy of prematurity, all the different. The one thing that's common about children with visual impairment is that everyone is different. And every visual, so building up that expertise, and that's where the QTVI comes in. And one of the concerns would be is a teacher on the ground in mainstream school won't have that body and bank of knowledge that was built up of special schools. But that's one of the things that you have to sort of counteract in the training, and that's why sort of the training has to be going on and year in, year out with schools from that side. But say, to me, sort of the issue is sort of thing. Schools being open to the expertise, and sometimes actually you can write advice. You go in and you teach it, and that's why actually the QTVIs go in and revisit the pupil. We don't just deliver the training come September and don't return. And it would be fair to say that most of us all will have cases that there will be schools you go in and it's great and the classroom assistant's doing this, and you will go back into other schools and you think, well, I told you last month to do this and nothing's happened this month. But that's just that is the way people are. Yes, it's not good enough, sort of thing. But there is an issue. But there definitely is also follow up. That when you've done your training with the staff in school, you go in and you ensure that the issue is being carried through and being followed through as well.
Okay.
From that side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trevor?
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for your presentation. I kind of judge these things on, excuse me, the number of times anything would be referred to me, and while I do get plenty of parents who are concerned about special needs with their children, I don't seem to get very many in terms of visual impairment. Maybe that's as you say, Stephen, because there's actually a low incidence situation. But that makes me think that even though this system, as the Chairman said, appears to be mighty complicated, but it works, and so really, I have only one simple question for you, and in terms of materials used in schools which are appropriate for visually impaired people and particularly blind people, what's the situation these days around Braille as versus iPads? I mean, are we moving from one technology to another?
The resource base, that's particularly their bread and butter. So probably Stephen could explain the position.
In relation to Braille, to start with, and children who access Braille, there are very few children actually who would be Braille users in Northern Ireland, and that the majority of children who are accessing Braille would be pupils at Jordanstown schools, with the exception of Margaret and Ruth will keep me right here about figures, because there's no Braille users in the Belfast board or the North Eastern board or South Eastern board, but in Southern board there would be 2 Braille users, in Western board the same.
We're only at pre-Braille
skills.
stage.
When the RVRB resource base was established for doing the large print and electronic versions of material, we did put out a tender for contracting for any requests that would come in for Braille materials. The Jordanstown School, they won the tender, so if we had a request for mainstream production of curriculum materials. We then pass it on to Jordanstown and they tender and they buy back the service from Belfast Education and Library Board. The tender is between them. But say, since the majority of Braille users at present are in Jordanstown School, they create their own materials inside school. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how much they produce in a year. There would be a move in general amongst people towards electronic learning and using PDFs and e-books and issues like that. But Braille is still a skill that needs to be taught and learned by someone who has no vision as a reading process. Some of the curriculum materials, which is wider than us, there's one of the issues that has happened at the minute is there's been a whole realignment of United Kingdom Braille, and the Braille code has changed in some not overly big ways, but enough to mean that a lot of curriculum materials that were commercially available from organisations such as the RNIB and the National Blind Braille Library are no longer usable and won't be from next year on because of changes in the Braille code. But that's being looked across UK wides of how to implement that, those changes and issues like that.
Okay, it's just I can remember within our time here, Chairman, at least, that there was an issue at one time at Jordanstown had a difficulty with accessing sufficient Braille material. I just forget who was getting the blame, but there was a...
Probably the department.
Yeah, but there was some kind of a shortage, but by the sound of it, we moved past that now, and those materials will be readily available for those, seems like a smaller number who need them. And your technology is moving at pace, as it is in other areas too.
One of the issues probably would be there still are difficulties with large print, and one of the things that we at the Regional Vision Resource Base would have discovered, when the resource base was set up, we were saying we're going to produce materials to the right font size that pupils need, be it font 18, 24, 36. And on the face of that, it all sounds wonderful, and parents think that it all comes quite easily. If you're doing something like a novel, it's very easy to reproduce that in font 18, but when you get to things like mathematical textbooks, foreign language textbooks, it's not just a matter of putting it on the scanner and then manipulating it with software to make the programs big. And also, actually, the bigger the print becomes, it actually is easier actually to produce mathematical material in Braille than it is in large print, because there are some things that they've come out of proportion, out of scale. But there are also national guidelines that there is actually a size of print that actually you can't go above, or it's no longer mathematically acceptable as a mathematical concept.
Right.
And one of the issues that relates into us and what we produce is that the Joint Council for Exams that oversees the work of SIA and all the other examining boards, they have stipulated that the largest size of font that a pupil can receive for an exam is font 24, so nothing will ever be produced in a GCSE or A-level exam that is larger than that font size, where some of our pupils with severe visual impairments actually do need to access font 36, so therefore it means they have to have arrangements made for exams that involve amanuenses and readers, electronic formats of that. There had also been a process developed 2 years ago. One of the things that a lot of pupils find difficult is that when they traditionally enlarge materials, it was enlarged to a font size and put onto A3 pieces of paper, which are very hard to manipulate. And there had been a proposal that went to the Joint Council for Exams to say that all enlarged material should appear on A4 paper. But the Joint Council, when it began to be done, they discovered issues that to enlarge to font 24 for some GCSEs and A-levels, it did not make it academically acceptable as an exam. To quote an example, a geography paper that a student studying the GCSE this summer in normal size print is 6 pages long. When you were putting it onto A4 paper and rising to 24 font size, it was becoming 90 pages long, which when the regulators looked at said that's too many pages to read in an exam, so that's why we've had to go back to A3 paper and things like that.
Well,
so it's a very complex situation.
Yeah, thanks for that. You're in danger of moving outside my area of technological expertise there, but when you go back
In danger.
on the A3 and A4, that was okay.
Thank you for science. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Sean?
Ladies, you're very welcome, Stephen. When Mike, Caroline, the idea of action plans and that are fine, but when it gets to the action, that's the key point. And just to go back to a point with Jonathan and Trevor both have made, I don't think we get as many queries regarding visual impairment as we do special education needs, but nonetheless we do. I spoke to a lady last year who was up here with a particular group, and her child was visually impaired. She had been talking to the board since February time. The child was now in P1 in October and was getting no extra help. There's nothing happening there. I suppose my question really is, and this was touched on by the Chair, is the support for visual impairment focused rather on general disability rather than sensory disability?
No, it's very much looking at the needs of the child in terms of their visual impairment and what that means for them in terms of accessing the curriculum, accessing the school environment and accessing resources. So it's very much about their visual impairment and not just general disability. Yeah.
But then why is it when, I can't remember which particular group produced a report to say that 25% of the children of visual impairment receive habilitation services support? Only 25% receive that.
Was that correspondence that the Chair had referred to earlier? I saw some correspondence, I don't know if it was between John Compton and the committee regarding the figures, and I believe John Compton had highlighted that there was some misunderstanding regarding those figures because the children's habilitation services figures were gathered in a different context, and that it was adult figures that had been looked at in that particular report. So I have a feeling, I'm not over the detail, but I do remember seeing something. Yeah.
Do you feel that with better linkage between health and education, that that percentage figure could be shot up much higher?
Well, the habilitation services is obviously within the health sector, but I mean, Margaret, you would have experience of going out with rehabilitation officers.
We would link with the rehab workers in our areas if we feel that there's a child that has particular needs that would require the support of a rehab worker. So, I mean, the figure may be low because maybe that's indicating that not all children require the support of a rehab worker. You know, there wouldn't be all of the children that we see in our caseloads. Not all of those children would require the support of a rehab worker. But maybe those children who would have a more significant visual loss. Even I be fair enough in saying that.
Yes, and we would find that in Belfast, it would be a low amount of children, because not every child with visual impairment will need access to a rehabilitation officer. Some children will, and actually this also goes back to socialisation of children as well. Now, some children need it because of lots of other environmental factors. But if you actually think about children in general, parents in general are a little bit more wary of letting their children go to the corner shop, go to the park on their own. It's just the world we're living in is not a safe area, and therefore that's actually the same as of young people with visual impairments. For some, there's less freedom. We're in a different world. So therefore, there then is more need for input because you're not learning the natural situations. There's less access and less ability to get to them. I suppose one of the issues where probably we do need to look at it is that there is the whole issue that if someone from health, if a rehabilitation worker does go into a school, who is actually responsible inside that school building? Because it's a health official that's come in, but it's in an educational institution, and I think there is some work that needs to be done there between the Department of Health and Education to sort of set that situation out and look at it. No, the situation which some of the voluntary sector organisations are probably picking up on and hearing across the rest of the United Kingdom and in the LEAs in England, where the service, a vision support service in an LEA in England, such as Warwickshire or Coventry, people have the QTVIs, but there also will be in the staff a rehabilitation officer based on that staff employed by the LEA. So you're actually working in teams, so it's not just a working together, but it is actually two people working for the same line manager doing the things. I think that's, so in some ways when we compare across to LEAs in England, we're not comparing like with how the situation sort of sets up, and there probably is an area for doing some work at looking at sort of, is there a need to develop along that line? Or
Okay.
Thanks, Stephen. That's helpful. Ruth, nice to see you again. If we take, for example, the Southern Board area, We have 2 visually impaired support teachers. How many young people would they be dealing with across the board area?
Figures I have at the moment are 51, but that would reflect the complete spectrum of visual impairment. We have no children or young people with a visual impairment in any of our special schools. They're all educated in mainstream, with one at a specialist setting. Walter.
I suppose, can these 2 experts give that sort of support to those schools? Are we talking about up to 40 or 50 schools here?
We believe so. At the moment, we believe the capacity we have is adequate to meet the need, and that's something that we would be revisiting in terms of supporting schools. We review that on a regular basis, but certainly at the moment we believe that to be appropriate.
Thanks, Ruth. And finally, my final question really is, when we think of visual impairment, we think of educational underachievement. We think of, the importance of literacy as a real building block for all the other pieces of education that all linked together in this jigsaw. What's been done to establish the link, if any, between visual impairment and underachievement?
I mean, I'm not aware of any studies. Certainly the department hasn't done any studies to make the links. We did look at some statistics regarding school leavers with visual impairment. The numbers are very, very small on a yearly basis, maybe 30 or 33. So when you have such a small number, it's actually, the percentages skew a lot year on year and person to person. So it's very difficult to maybe establish trends that have any robustness. I mean, there are particular examples in board areas where children have gone on. Stephen mentioned one the other day to me. A child, one of his pupils had gone on to further or higher education.
Well, I was saying my caseload for the Belfast Educational Library Board, which basically takes in the north of the city and the east of the city. So I had 2 young folks with visual impairments who were leaving upper 6th, year 14. And I know this is a bit of, doesn't skew properly. And one was a grammar school and one was secondary. And both those young people have gone on to university, one attending St Mary's and one attending the university in Glasgow. Now, I know that can skew it sort of thing, that both my upper 6th people who left have gone on to university, but so they did achieve at that level. And I know that some supporting for the Regional Vision Resource Base, we would end up by requests for materials of knowing a lot about the academic advance of other pupils, because if you move into 6th form, we know what A levels they're being prepared for, and I know that definitely within the Southern Educational Library Board, I've had requests for materials that at least 5 of the people who've moved from year 12 to year 13 have all gone on to take on A levels, and they're all doing and they're ranging from accountancy A level to history A level to music A level. So there's a wide remit of things like that.
And that is our role. Our role is to ensure the best possible outcomes for all children and young people with an impairment.
Do you not believe, there are many young people who slip through the net in terms of their diagnosis as well of visual impairment. It might be later on in life they discover that some particular thing. Do you not believe that there needs to be a closer look taken at the link between children that have a visual impairment and underachievement?
Well, I don't know whether there would be as many children with visual impairment slipping through the net as maybe other, the diagnosis element. I mean, I'm not a professional. I mean, it's certainly something that could be considered, but as I said, because the numbers are so small, even in terms of tracking percentages, 1 year's massive increase might simply be because, as Stephen said, 2 children went to university. So there are difficulties with tracking it, but I mean, it's certainly something that could be considered, yes.
Thanks. My own feeling is that the numbers are larger than what I think. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Just before we move on to Joanne, can I welcome the pupils of St Michael's Grammar School in Ergun in the public gallery? I understand maybe we might have a former teacher of Sharon's present as well. He's keeping an eye on Sharon down there. We'll talk to the teacher later. You're very welcome. Can I wish the pupils every success? Trust you enjoy your visit to Stormont. It doesn't put you off politics. It doesn't put you off education, and we have officials from the department and the Education and Library Boards in front of us this morning, and we're discussing the issue, if you've heard, of barriers to children and young people with visual impairment. So that's what we're doing this morning, so thank you for coming to see us. Thank you.
Could I just sort of say something, Sean, about numbers?
Yes, just quickly, because I want members to keep this moving, because we are running badly behind time. Yes, quickly.
There has been this debate it's been going on for at least 14 years about have we got the diagnosis of the right number of children with visual impairments. And I started working for RNIB in '98, and there was a report was issued then called the Case for Change, and there was a lot of issue there about under-identification. But I had done a dissertation then, and I know lots and lots of research since then, and it does seem to be that we do have the numbers right, that there are no more than 960 children within Northern Ireland between 0 and 19 with a visual impairment, and it seems to be staying static at that. If there's anything, the one area where there might be an under-representation is children with complex needs within the S sector, with cognitive visual impairments, and that's an area that probably needs to be looked at.
Okay,
from those
thank you, Stephen. Thanks for that. Joanne?
Thanks, Chair. Can I thank you for your briefing? I missed the start of it, but I have read it in detail. My first question is in relation to the ETI recommendations. In their words, to ensure more efficient access to C2K facilities for utilising assistive technology. Can you maybe expand on this for me, and what actions have been taken with C2K since then to improve the situation for our visually impaired students?
Okay, maybe if I could take that question, Joanne. We had representation from C2K at our last QTVI meeting. As you know, C2K has been transformed at the minute, so there are a number of changes within the school settings in relation to access to C2K, and there have been some issues, in particular for children with a visual impairment, in relation to some of the programmes like JAWS or Supernova, the programmes that allow them to have speech recognition or to enlarge the information on their screen. So as late as in the last 2 months, we've had a meeting with C2K in relation to that, and they're progressing those issues to look at how those things can be resolved. So they're very aware of them, and our staff would be in contact with C2K all the time, John. So.
Okay. Yeah. So you're confident they will be resolved? It just was been very worrying.
Yeah, well we're keeping going at it.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's important for us that the issues are resolved. So yeah.
And then, have any pilots been undertaken with certain schools? Are you planning any pilots when these issues are resolved with certain schools, or has it been left to individual schools or pupils to resolve this issue? You know.
No, I mean, when our teachers are out in the schools, part of what they will be doing would be looking at the child's access to assistive technology. So there will be children that they know that will require assistive technology and will require those enlargements on their screen and will require accessibility options. So they will be monitoring that when they're out in the schools.
And will there be opportunities for schools to share best practice then?
Yeah, well, I mean, the teachers will share the practice between one school and another. You know, if QTV is out in one school and they see something good that's happening when they're out in other schools, they will share the information that way.
That will happen.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question would be, I know you touched on this earlier, Margaret, about how long it generally takes a pupil to receive support when it's first flagged up that they have a visual impairment. The reason I'm asking this, I know from my own constituency office and helping pupils with medical needs that it can take quite some time and there's a lot of hoops to go through. Quite often it's very bureaucratic. Does seem to, and so frustrating for the parents, it does seem to take a long time for the children to receive the support they need. So and I know this was touched on in a lot of detail earlier, given the potential impact on the academic achievement, and Sean was very good in his question that, how content are you that the support is there and it's there quickly? Can you take it through? I know you said that the first port of call is with the parents.
Yeah.
Timescales, can you take us maybe through that process?
Yeah, once we get the referral in from the low vision clinic or the ophthalmologist or community paediatrician, we send a letter out, and that letter goes out within a number of days out to the parents. When we get the consent form back in from the parents, then we will ring the schools then to arrange a visit. So it happens pretty quickly, Joanne. It happens as quickly as we get the consent from the parents to actually make the visit. Obviously, if we get referrals during the summer period, there's going to be that period of time between when we receive the referral and the teacher can get out into the school. But we're out there at the earliest possible opportunity.
I have had some parents share with me their frustrations on the timescale and
Right.
the over bureaucratic nature of it as well, and that, you know, them being kept in the loop. That do seem to, what they have told me, they seem to have to do all the running to get that for their children.
Because I would be concerned.
Is that from through the health system in terms of the diagnosis, or is it in terms of the education support?
It can be both. It can be both from the education point of view as well.
Yeah,
So you are confident it
I
is?
would be concerned if parents are saying that there's a long period of waiting between when we get the referral and get their consent and teachers are out into schools.
Okay.
But we need to be
But it's-
careful
yeah.
that what we're not doing is mixing health-related issues
Yeah.
as opposed to children with visual impaired issues.
Yeah.
You know, that can be a very general statement,
Okay.
which is covering a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Are we saying that there are children specifically who have visual impairment issues that are being delayed in the system? I think that,
And I know the work
what you're saying, Margaret, that's not the
the
case.
work with the SENCO, you know, is vital. But it's just parents have told me that they feel there's so many hoops to jump through, and it does seem to them to be over bureaucratic, and you know.
Well, I think in terms of the teachers, there wouldn't be as many hoops to jump through. You know.
It may be that if the particular child is perhaps going through the statutory assessment process
Maybe
for a
that's what it's
statement, I
referring
wonder if it's in that
Yes,
context.
and there is a time frame set for that.
Yeah.
I'm well aware of that and
Yeah.
how long it does. That's
Yeah.
don't get me started in the
Yeah.
statement process, because that's a massive issue. I know probably for us all through our
Yeah.
constituency offices, but I know it does seem to be over what they're telling me, over bureaucratic, and there's quite a lot of hoops to jump through. But
I mean, for us, the process is as simple as that. We get the referral in, we write out to the parents, we get the consent back from the parents, and then we
and
contact
you're
the school.
confident in most cases, Margaret.
Well, I'm
as
certainly
quickly as
confident
that?
in our own boards that's happening. If it's not, it may be a one-off situation that we need to look at. But yeah.
Okay.
Just finally, Chair, can all children, I know the Chair touched on this at the start, and all board areas get equal access to the low vision clinic, or does it differ from across the boards? Is that widely available?
The low vision clinic is a health. That's part of it. It's a health clinic. So
I
in
know, but
terms
it's
of
part and
access to
parcel
that,
with the-
I'm not aware of the health, how health operates in terms of in terms of access to its clinics. I don't have the detail on that.
Okay. But across boards, do you have any statistics? Obviously, this is cross-cutting with health and education across the boards. Do you know,
In terms
have
of
all the boards access to that low vision clinic from an education perspective?
We have access to information from the low vision clinics, and some board staff will be invited to go along and sit in and attend the low vision clinics, whereas in other boards that maybe doesn't happen. I know in a couple of the boards, because it's representation from Jordanstown at the low vision clinics, then the QTVI staff from the associated boards don't sit in the clinics, but I know in other areas they do. So
Just it would be good to know if all children from all boards get equal access to the low vision clinic. That's maybe something we could probe maybe through.
That's maybe something to go through the health committee to confirm.
But yet, in the paper that we have received, it says the Western Education Library Board operates in school low vision clinics and special schools within its area.
In some board, such as the Western Board, the QTVI itself.
That's not the same in
clinic,
every other board.
And for the Northeastern Board, the Jordans and the Southeastern Board, and Belfast, the QTVI from Jordanstown School will go and then feed back the information
But
to
yet,
those
the
boards. So there's a
department-
QTVI at the clinic.
Yeah, but Caroline, just clarify this for us. The department told us in correspondence in August last year that there was the vision clinic in Jordanstown, because of staffing issues, have been put on hold. What is the
I think
situation
that's
now?
different.
Is that
clinic.
potentially, when the new school was built at Jordanstown, I know that for their own pupils, they had hoped to have, there's me just going on assumption looking into it about this difference in this, that Jordanstown had hoped to set up low vision clinic
It's,
happening in the Jordanstown campus, as opposed to Jordanstown pupils having to come to the Royal for the low vision clinic there, sort of thing. So, and that would have always only inside Jordanstown would have always been Jordanstown children. But the current process is there are 2 Mondays in a month where the Vice Principal of Jordanstown attends the low vision clinic at the Royal, and then their remit is to report back to the South Eastern Belfast Board.
Chair, that's worrying. I think we should probe that further. I know Caroline said it's a health issue, but obviously the impact if the pupils aren't getting, I would like to think every pupil across the board was getting access to the low vision clinic, because that's the impact on their education as well.
They are getting
you've
access.
assured me that it's very quick and very swift.
Yeah.
So obviously part and parcel of that would be their access to the low vision clinic, and if that isn't available, surely that's going to impact on their schooling too.
Yeah, but I think what we're saying, Joanne, is they do have access to the low vision clinic, but the QTVIs and the relevant education boards may not be in attendance at the low vision clinics when they attend for their appointments, but that the information is shared from Jordanstown
So
School
all
to
children from all boards have access to the clinic then?
I can't comment. I can only comment on the ones that we're involved with. So.
Presumably, I mean, it's a case of a child that has a visual impairment through its care and through its health sector care. There's presumably regular checkups and attendance at clinics, and it would be through that form. The low vision clinics are not for its education needs, albeit that we see the reason why we go, the QTVIs go, or the Jordanstown goes on perhaps on behalf of some boards, is because the information that's gleaned there is, of course, relevant to.
It's relevant to their education.
Yeah,
needs.
exactly,
yes.
and that's why we
Important
attend.
factor.
But in terms of the clinics and the appointments, they get that through the health the health system.
I just want to ensure that all children do have the access to it. There's maybe an urgent written question. Okay, thank you.
Trevor, you just want to comment very briefly.
Well, it wasn't in relation to that, Chairman. If anybody else is...
Right, okay, yes, I'll come back to. I thought it was on that point. Maeve.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just to clarify, first of all, Stephen, you were talking in terms of the identified need almost, or the numbers of people visually impaired or blind, and the ETI report had said that there was over 1,000 people accessing the vision support. Has that remained? Is that what you're saying? That's remained the same? There isn't an uptake in that support?
The numbers in terms of children that are supported by the VI services across the boards has remained fairly static over the years. The difficulty with the figures, I think, that were provided by the ETI were that they were figures that were gained from school census, and when schools submitted their information, they actually included children who were wearing glasses. They included children that didn't meet the criteria for visual impairment, or children that we would be seeing as part of our service. So that number there is likely to be inflated.
Yeah.
So the 1,000
I
currently
would say
seeking
that's
vision support is
I would say that number is.
inflated.
I would say it is. Yeah.
Do we have a sense then of what a more accurate figure would be?
Well, from Belfast Education Library Board's point of view, there are 152 children on the caseload, and I think, does that reflect?
I mean, we
similar
can
across
get
other
those
boards?
figures for you. I can get that through the QTVI meeting.
I think it would be useful,
it'd be useful to
Chair, as
have,
well,
yes,
that
it would,
they have
yeah.
that, because ultimately, if you're targeting a service, you need to know where the need is. But just to go back to the report itself in 2012, and obviously it did find that there was good overall provision in mainstream schools, but it did recommend the improvement in relation to training, communication and resources. And I noted, Caroline, that you'd said they are almost complete.
Well,
Could I maybe ask, well, what is not complete?
Well, I think there is some remaining training being rolled out at the moment. The boards had been taking forward the particular points, I think it was on the training aspect.
One of the points that had been raised was the support for children who have a visual impairment and other learning difficulties, known as MDVI. So we're currently in the process of arranging training for staff in the VI services, and also we're hoping that there will be training for staff in the special schools who support these children. And we're also looking at widening that and bringing in possibly occupational therapists, physiotherapists and speech and language therapists, so that it's an integrated service approach rather than just training for the QDBI staff. So that's what we're in the process of doing at the minute.
And in terms of resource?
When the report was written in 2012, the resource base RVRB was only being established. And at that stage, I think back in 2012, we had created 400 large print books, whereas now, since then, we've been year in, year out producing 1,500 or thereabouts in large materials. We have also been establishing, and when that report was written, this hadn't been completely finalised and established, the RNIB, in partnership with the Belfast Education Library Board and the resource base, have established a resource library based at the resource base, where they give us the foundation material, and the Belfast Education Library Board, who are the holders of the budget for the regional division resource base, since 2012 have been adding to the resource library. The idea of that being that it's a range of technology, including iPads, laptops, closed-circuit televisions and other electronic aids that the qualified teachers of the visually impaired across the 5 boards can borrow from the resource library, with a view to trying before you buy. That sort of, it's very expensive material, but they can try it, and then they can decide after a term if this is a piece of equipment that's useful for a child. It will then go to purchasing from special education within the boards. So that has been developed. We also, under the directive of the Children and Young People Services of Belfast Education and Library Board, through RVRB, established an iPad pilot, where we've been looking at the use of iPads with 15 young people across the 5 education and library boards, and also developing loaning to primary school children, which once again, with partnership with RNIB and fundraising from Bombardier, they got resources for that. So there's actually been voluntary and even public sector and education boards working in partnership there to develop resources, and it actually was quite exciting actually to sort of have that sort of level of input. So we have been developing up those resources to develop. The one concern probably that we would have in Belfast about the resource base is it was established on a 3-year earmark funding, and now we're in the situation of year-in earmark funding on year. I think sort of it would be nice to see the resource base being recognised as a permanent feature within the education system in Northern Ireland, because we're training up technicians to quite a high level of qualification, but because of the nature of the year-end funding, they're all still sitting in temporary contracts 2 years on. And when you've got young people in their 20s who are maybe beginning to look at mortgages and you've trained them for a good job, you just have this fear that they're not going to stay with us because we can't guarantee them a permanent job because of how the situation
So
is
has the
funded.
fund in 2014-15 been?
It has been confirmed.
It has been confirmed.
Fantastic.
And that comes from the department via the Belfast Education
It
Library
does,
Board.
yes.
But it's still only recurrent. So it's not. So it could be gone next
Well,
year.
I think because of the way the overall funding is working, we're working just to this year, and then there's going to be a separate.
So we've
next year.
had a system whereby this has only been funded year on year.
Yeah.
It's not been deemed as being a necessary component part
Well, I
of the
think-
department's funding
I mean,
status.
it is a necessary. I mean, when it was established in 2011, I mean, certainly the minister places a high priority on it, and earmarked funding. I mean, the benefit of the earmarked funding is, it goes specifically to the base and not into the general board pot. So, and the minister has on numerous occasions said that he's committed to protecting SEND funding, and this would be one element of it.
Okay, just finally, I wanted to pick up on, obviously, and part of it, my capacity as chair of the Health Committee. I would suggest that there are organisations and individuals whose experience in terms of access to service is poor, and there is reflected quite often an inconsistency across trusts. I would assume that if there's cooperation properly in place, that you may be seeing some of that as well. But I wanted to pick up specifically on what Stephen was saying, and you referred to that there's still, and this is the communication piece, but it's more than that in my view, there's still a lot of work to be done within the both departments, and you talked about other models where two people are working for potentially the same line manager in relation to education and health. I mean, are we moving towards developing, exploring those kind of protocols?
Well, what will be particularly relevant in that? I mean, one example of an area where Health are proactively looking at it is this review of the allied health professional support, particularly to children with statements, initially in special schools and then in mainstream schools. And I know the remit for that, and that PHA and ourselves are coming next week to explain it, is to look at a different model of support. I mean, that's one area, I mean, a fundamental area for children with SEN in terms of what therapy support they get from the health side. So that is indicative of a need and a recognition of a need to look at a regional model and to ensure that the support is there for young people.
Okay, and just finally, Chair, I think that's critically important because it is ultimately more than communication. And we were having the conversation earlier, for example, about access to GP records or medical assessments, and the fact that if a GP comes into a school, they're ultimately within that particular framework. So I think it's more than communication. I think we need to look at protocols that ensure that there is the direct service and an access to service in place, and I don't think it's there yet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Robin?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the members of the panel for coming up? Can I just ask two short questions? I think probably just require short answers, Chair. Margaret actually indicated that there are transition plans in place between nursery, primary, second level education. What is the transition plan when the young person then goes on to FE or higher education? What is that plan? Can I ask you then also, in terms of the service that is provided in Northern Ireland, how does that compare with what's on offer in England, Scotland or Wales? Do we benchmark favourably against that other service, or has it been done even?
I'll maybe answer the first part for you in relation to transition when children are leaving school and going to further education. Our teachers will link with the colleges and provide information in relation to the change visual impairment, maybe the types of assistive technology that they've been using, how their visual impairment will impact on their learning. So that's it. I mean, we have no role in third level education, so so that it really is about the sharing of information between ourselves and the colleges.
If I could maybe come in here, as appropriate, Robin, the Code of Practice and the Identification and Assessment of Special Educational Needs sets out the framework for the annual review process. And the first annual review after a young person's 14th birthday is of particular and special significance, and that's the process that begins the transition planning in partnership with transition coordinators in each of the boards, working with our colleagues in health and FE, voluntary community sector as well, to ensure that there is an appropriate and relevant pathway for all of our young people as they exit education, whether that be at 16, 18 or 19.
Can you just ask, what would that look like? What would actually happen in those circumstances as the two very successful young people that Stephen talked about who were going on to higher level education? What would it look like?
A transition plan will begin at age 14, and then as the pupils have their annual review in year 11, the transition coordinator may be invited to that, but they will definitely be there at year 12, 13, 14 and 15 as a young person progresses through their education. So it will be a plan. It will outline partnerships with other organisations. It will outline the pathway. It will have, very importantly, the input of the young person themselves, input from parents, input from school. So it's a comprehensive document, but it's very much a working document that sets a pathway for the young person to move into adulthood.
Yeah. Can I ask you, in terms of the young man who went to Glasgow, was there contact with Glasgow as he made that transition?
Yes, there was. When a young person applies through the UCAS system to university, there is a box that they have to tick which identifies them as having a disability. And then in their personal statements, they would be encouraged to sort of highlight some of those issues. And that box ticked, my understanding is that then automatically triggers off through UCAS when your application goes to universities. It automatically alerts the disability services within each university and that it is an issue. And then the young person will, if a university is going to make an offer, or it may be depending on the course before the offer is made, an interview would be set up with the university and the young person and their parents to discuss the various issues on that side. So UCAS takes off a sort of situation as well. And then when they're finishing upper sixth in year 14, young people with disabilities, be the visual impairment or whatever, still are entitled to sort of a grant for equipment and things like that. So their LEA or their Education and Library Board will be providing the grant forms for that to be applied for as well. And if you're going to somewhere like the Belfast Met, they have a similar system. When you apply for Belfast Met, there's a trigger on the form that triggers off involvement with disability services.
I suppose I'm particularly interested because a young man in my constituency, it was a deafness problem, a hearing problem he had, and he was at university for probably 3 or 4 months before anything kicked in, and it was only after we made some inquiries as to why he wasn't getting the support, and then the university said, "Oh yes, there is the support." But it wasn't happening for the first 3 or 4 months that he was at university. So, I mean, if it's UCAS have the responsibility to make it happen, is that what you're saying?
It's actually the young person who applies to university because it's on the UCAS form that you tick the declaration sort of thing. So basically, if you haven't declared it yourself, that's where the first trigger is missed. And once again, that actually goes back to sort of the QTVI working with the parent and the young person when they're in upper sixth of sort of saying it, because I know definitely the 2 young folks that I was working with sort of thing, with them and their classroom assistant, we did discuss the UCAS form. Have you filled it in? Are you going to it? Because actually, come back to my other point, the child with visual impairment maybe doesn't want to tick the box and doesn't want in their personal statement to declare their disability sort of thing. So it's working with them and supporting them through that as well.
How do they compare with England, Scotland or Wales?
I'm not aware of any comparative data, but we're very pleased, certainly with the Transition Services, a survey at the moment being carried out through ETI, looking at the transition service, and they work very much collaboratively as well as within each of their individual boards.
Sure.
Danny?
Thank you, and thanks very much for the presentation. And I haven't had any calls in my office, so I hope that's a good sign. But I do feel all the way through what we're hearing that I think we all want to see is that it's total. It does cover everybody. What intrigued me is the Belfast Board's report saying that I think when the new technology came in, they had an increase in the numbers. Is that because people wanted the technology and were therefore bending rules to get the technology earlier, in whether they had an impairment, or is it because there are more people out there who need the technology, and therefore is there a bigger number outside all the boards that we maybe don't know about, which if we increase the supply of technology to them would get to more people?
I think the base is for the region as opposed to the Belfast Board.
Yeah.
So all boards access the resources at the base, which is cited in the Belfast Education and Library Board.
Okay, but they said when there was a supply, I mean, the page again, it was 44. It said we've already seen a sharp increase in inclusion for pupils with sensory impairments and a decline in the numbers of crying. I mean, if you see an increase in the number on the back of supplying technology, surely it means there's a whole lot of people out there that we aren't reaching, that have suddenly come forward.
Inclusion.
Is that specific?
This is actually I think what they were saying there. If it's a letter of the 8th of July from last year, I think what they're saying there is that there's more children being educated in mainstream schools with those sorts of supports rather than the specialist placements. So the assistive technology is actually helping, enabling more inclusion and more education in mainstream schools, rather than needing to go to potentially a special school.
Okay, it's just what I wanted to get that clear. Okay, on a different point was on the transition again going down Are you confident that the transition plans are happening for everybody that needs them in every area?
Yes, it's a statutory requirement. They're there, the part of the annual review
That
process.
was going to be my next question.
Absolutely, yes.
Our note said obliged, it didn't say
Yes.
statutory, and I was going to...
Yeah,
okay.
and the department, as Ruth has referred to, has actually commissioned ETI to do a survey of the current transition service, so that we can, just evaluate how what's happening and whether there's any room for improvement.
Then on the back of that, I mean, we touched on it when you were following through, Stephen, on going to university. Does it follow through to those who go into employment? Or does it just stop dead after school?
There is communication, and as I said, it is a working document which will have made those anticipatory links and communications with those who will be part of the ongoing pathway for the young person.
So it does feed back into
Oh, it does,
so
yes.
we keep
That's
improving.
its purpose.
Great, and thank you.
Can I
I
just
suppose there'd be
clarify?
one thing worth highlighting, Caroline, is for just because there could be constituency situations where people say, "Oh, my child doesn't have a transition plan." We are talking about children with statements.
Yes, well,
and there are a
that was the
number of
point,
children-
Stephen, I was going to
There are a
make.
number of
We
children
need
with
to
visual
clarify.
impairments who do not have visual impairments,
Yes.
so therefore there will not be a transition plan for
Exactly,
them.
because I think that we would be led to a false
Yeah.
assumption.
Yes.
Yeah.
Only a statutory requirement for children who have a statement
Yes.
that they have a transition plan.
Yes, which when I first started to speak about the actual process, I talked about the code of practice.
Yeah,
And
Yes.
we're talking within that framework, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, that's me. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Trevor, you have one final question.
Yes, thanks. It was just something that Stephen said earlier on when you were talking about font sizes and paper sizes and examinations. Did you actually say that the examination authorities have a maximum size of these things that
I did.
that they allow pupils to use?
Yep.
How do you resolve the situation if a particular pupil needs a bigger font size?
If they need a bigger font size, where the examining boards then are looking at situations the pupil is either going to get an electronic version of the paper, which is becoming possible now, but there still are regulations of that, of what that is, of what's allowed, and therefore having a screen reader where the material is read to them, rather than having to read themselves. Using low vision aids if they need to use them. Some young people will use what an amanuensis, where there will be a person in the exam room who will read the paper to them. The problem with that is there are some exams, particularly in English subjects, that you can't use an amanuensis because you can't have a human person reading something that the tone can indicate the understanding of the reading, if you know what I mean, for English literature and stuff like that. But so electronic learning and the developments in electronic have actually made more of that now possible, because a computer can't put tone into what's being read. But if a young person had a severe visual impairment, they would be moving to using sort of speech, particularly if there's someone who does not have he's not using Braille. Or you maybe have an example of a child who lost sight quite rapidly last year, of what they had to do for that child at Western Board.
We
wasn't
actually
it?
used the screen reader, so
Screen
it was
reader,
the papers were prepared electronically, so they were able to access the information
Maybe
that
as
way.
well, it might be useful, Trevor, as clarification from SIA, because obviously they're the qualifications body in relation to
Yeah,
it.
I just want to be satisfied, really.
I think it's a nationally set
It is not,
Yeah.
requirement.
Probably
It's
the
wider
council.
than
Are we reasonably satisfied that there are not pupils who are having to struggle at examination time because of that sort of restriction? There's usually a resolution to it.
I have to say, SIA have been extremely supportive, and in relation
well,
to that
that would be
student who
useful.
suddenly lost their sight, they did everything in their power to make the exam papers accessible to that child. So, yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
SIA will support us in whatever way, and even sort of when JCC say, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing that," they will, because there are strict rules, for instance, from JCC that say if you haven't applied for additional things by the 15th of October, it's too late. Whereas SIA will sort of, because of a smaller area, will sort of work with us, and schools that sort of are
Okay.
But there's a book that every school receives, the examination officer receives every August, with the regulations for all access arrangements, and all that's available for.
Letter to say I might not.
Yeah, I think we'll do that, yeah. Caroline, Ruth, Stephen and Margaret, thank you very much. That was
Thank you.
very useful, very informative. Thank you, and thanks for your input. And also, thanks for the work that you do, because sometimes people come to the committee and they feel as though they're coming here to get beat up. That's not the case. We do appreciate, and I know for those parents and families who have children and young people who are visually impaired, they do value the work that you do is and is appreciated by this committee. I don't want you to leave here with the impression that somehow all we are looking for is an issue to be sensational about or make a headline for us. That ain't certainly what I'm not about, nor this committee will be about. But we are there to, where there's issues, explore them with you, and where we possibly can be of help or assistance, not a hindrance. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of things just following on from that. One, in terms of, I think it would be useful, Trevor, if we did get clarification from SIA in relation to how they ensure that young people, particularly those for examinations, are adequately provided for and their needs are met. Okay. That was one issue. The other issue was around division, the clinics. I think we need clarification. We have one board. What is the situation in all the other boards? What is the up-to-date situation in regards to Jordanstown? We've clarified the issue about funding, but I think we should write to the department as well and ask them when are they going to make the funding for the resource, regional vision resource space, a core funding as opposed to the current. Anything else, Robin?
I have to say it surprised me when they said we don't know what, or we haven't looked at what's being provided. We don't know whether we're providing the very best service or...
Yes, the only thing that they're probably doing that is on the basis of an ETI. And again, it comes back to the issue that we'll come back to later on, the independence of ETI. There was queries. In fact, you saw Margaret making a reference to the ETI report. It said that the numbers in the ETI report were inflated because of the issue of the fact that children included with glasses are in those figures. So I assume what you're saying is how can we ensure that it's smart?
I don't want a huge piece of work or anything, but I think we should get some guidance as to whether or not we're very good.
A good piece of work for Sharon, who's now gone to research.
Well, there you are.
Not our Sharon, but the other Sharon.
Yes, the other Sharon.
Yes. She'll be delighted, I'm sure, to receive correspondence from us.
Okay, research, very good.
Is that the sort of thing?
That's the sort of thing,
yes.
Chair, yes.
That might be.
Yes.
Not more than 90 pages.
Not more than 90 pages.
I think members also wanted an update on the numbers. I think we do actually have that in our packs, but the boards produce numbers of kids who actually are availing of those services in different ways. So I couldn't add them up. I tried to. So I'll ask again.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to a non-departmental briefing relating to access to health services of visually impaired children. The clerk's cover note at page 88 and the briefing paper has been provided at page 92 in the meeting packs. And also table papers you'll find a related letter from the Association of British Dispensing Opticians. And we're just going to have our guests. And we are pleased that you have been with us this morning. You've heard to date what has been said. Michael, can I welcome you here? Thank you for the paper that you've already provided for us. Cara, thank you for coming. Michelle, you're very welcome. So I'll ask you, Michael, to make a presentation, and then if members have questions, we'll take those questions. And if you have comment to make on what you've heard, I'm sure you want to maybe make it now as well.
Okay. First of all, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about something that I have become very passionate about over the years. I've always had an interest in children's vision, and about 15 years ago I took a particular interest in dyslexia. About 10 years ago I opened up a visual stress clinic within our own practice in Warrenpoint. My experience and research has unearthed a wealth of important issues, some of which I want to bring to your attention today. There is a direct correlation between poor eyesight and underperformance in school. A staggering 1 million children in the United Kingdom have undetected vision problems. This equates to 34,000 of our children in Northern Ireland underachieving in school because of vision problems. The current screening that is carried out in Primary 1 in our schools is done by a school nurse who has been trained by an orthoptist to identify squints and lazy eyes. Parents are under the impression that this screening is a full eye examination. It is not. The screening in schools as it stands does not detect small and moderate corrections. Convergence insufficiency, which affects 7 to 12% of the children's population. accommodation or focusing ability, which affects 6 to 10% of the population, muscle imbalances, eye tracking, pattern glare, which affects up to 20% of the population. Often these dysfunctions I have mentioned are not checked even in a normal eye examination, and it is precisely these dysfunctions that are causing many of our school population to fail unnecessarily. As a result, the Departments of Health and Education are spending massive amounts of money on alternative interventions, such as peripatetic support or educational psychology assessments, when the problem could easily be resolved with corrected visual dysfunctions. When a child has to be seen by an educational psychologist or occupational therapist, then, in my opinion, a comprehensive vision assessment must be done as well. After all, 80% of our learning is visual, and if a child cannot see properly, any test that a psychologist asks that child to carry out will be clouded. Because of the constraints of time, I cannot explain in detail each of the dysfunctions, but if I could explain the importance of detecting one of them, convergence insufficiency. Our eyes are designed to work together to give us single, clear vision. Convergence insufficiency is an eye coordination disorder, where the two eyes do not work together the way they are supposed to. The more severe the disorder, the more difficult it is for the eyes to work in ways to support effective reading. Now, I'm going to demonstrate two diagrams. The first diagram demonstrates what it's like for a child that has got good reading ability, and their eyes would focus on the page and they'll see the text nice and clearly. However, with a child with convergence insufficiency, the two eyes won't focus on the page and they'll see a blurring of the image. And the second sheet is a simulation of what it would be like for a child with a convergence insufficiency. The symptoms are similar to some types of dyslexia: loss of place when reading, loss of concentration, rereading the same line, reading slowly, words blurring, trouble remembering what was read, headaches, eyes feeling tired, words moving or swimming or jumping about. When a child has a convergence problem, it is almost impossible for them to read with any fluency. Since children do not know what they are supposed to see when they are learning to read, they rarely complain. When they see double, instead they struggle with reading, often avoiding it at every opportunity. They may be able to read aloud in a very broken, non-fluid manner, yet they don't remember what they read. Recent studies have established a link between visual dysfunctions such as convergence insufficiency and dyslexia. If a child has any eye coordination problem contributing to his or her challenges with reading, then it is important to fix the vision problem first. Most of the patients that I see have struggled for years in school, trying all other interventions before finding out that they had vision problems that were easily corrected. It must be noted also that a child with convergence insufficiency will report many of the same symptoms as a child with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Blurred vision, eye rubbing, frequent loss of place when reading, headaches, easily distracted, minor or major behavioural issues. As a result, in my experience, a wrong diagnosis of ADHD may be made. I know that convergence insufficiency is only one visual function, but all the other visual functions will cause similar difficulties to a child's educational performance. When a vision disorder, not a learning disorder, is at the roots of a child's difficulties with reading, we often see children excel in school once the vision problem has been treated. One of the projects that I've undertaken was with St Clair's Convent Primary School in Newry. The principal of the school, Mrs Michelle Monaghan, has joined me here today along with the parent of one of the children, Mrs. Ciara Riley. Before my comprehensive screening of a class of 27 primary 5 girls, only two children wore glasses, and 16 out of the 27 had never had an eye test. When I completed all the screening tests for the dysfunctions I mentioned earlier, out of the 27 girls, 13 needed corrective glasses. 4 needed prescribed tinted lenses, which are specialised lenses, and 2 required eye exercises. As a result of corrected visual dysfunctions, most of these girls who had been underachieving went on to achieve their academic potential over the next 3 years. For the purposes of my research, I took a random sample of 100 patients aged 6 to 16 whom I've seen at my visual stress clinic in Warrenpoint. If I could share with you the statistics from the sample. Now, these are all children that are coming to me because they have difficulties.
Yeah.
11 out of the 100 had convergence insufficiency, as mentioned before. 15 out of the 100 had defective accommodation. Now, a child with defective accommodation will have difficulty focusing close work up to the board and back and so forth. 7 out of the 100 had a muscle imbalance at close work. 19 out of the 100 had poor eye tracking. Children with poor eye tracking are more inclined to lose their place with reading. They'll use their finger more, they'll skip and repeat lines. 30 out of the 100 had pattern glare difficulties, making reading of text difficult. Amazingly, 68 out of the 100 had never had an eye examination. And out of those 68, 40 needed corrective glasses. 60 out of the 100 patients in that random selection had a vision problem that would most definitely prevent them from ever reaching their true academic potential. And amazingly enough, very similar to results that we got from St Clair's Primary School. We know that many children, including those with learning disabilities and coordination problems, have vision dysfunctions. So screening for these dysfunctions is imperative. Healthy eyes and proper vision are essential ingredients for effective learning. Reading, writing, spelling, maths, movement are all areas that could be affected by uncorrected vision. I'm sure you will agree with me that we cannot allow this to be the case, and so I am asking you today to back me in my proposals to carry out an extensive pilot study, which will be a unique project with both teaching and optical professions, where teaching and optical professions will work together to prove that children who are underperforming can be helped significantly with a thorough vision assessment in primary school. Thank you.
Michael, that is a completely different story to one that we've just previously heard. And that's the, and you can appreciate that that is the challenge. And I'm glad that we have a parent here today. And can I commend you on your visual aids? You're the first person to come to this committee who think has recognised the limitations of committee members and they need something in front of them to make it easier for them to understand. So thank you for your honesty on that. But in terms of, if you go back to the, and thank you for the paper that you've provided to us. We go back to the sample, the 100 pupils that was done, and it was that were those weren't the pupils that were in Michelle's school.
No,
those were referrals.
Yeah.
Can you clarify for me, first of all, from whom did the referrals come?
Well, frustratingly, word of mouth.
Right. Okay. So they weren't referrals that would be picked up in the normal process of, for want of a better word, the system.
Majority of them, no.
No, because we look at the current system as it is under Developing Eye Care Partnership, the strategy published by the Department of Health back in October 12. The strategy says an eye examination within 72 hours of birth, a GP eye exam at 8 weeks, a referral to orthopaedic service, a squint or reduced vision is observed, a vision assessment for all 2-year-old children, P1 universal screening by school health with targeted screening for children and relevant family history. Now, if I was reading that, I would say P1 if there's an issue, it'll be picked up. Over 60% of the children that you saw had never had
An eye test.
an eye test. Why is that not? Is the case that at P1 it's not universal?
Well, what happens in P1 is a screening that's done by the school nurse. And the school nurse is trained by the orthoptist, and primarily they're looking for squints or lazy eyes.
Yeah.
They're not looking for the things that I've shown here. The perception is with parents that because they've been screened in school, they've had an eye test. And that's my experience anyway, and they avoid having an eye test in future. Like, I have children coming to me 16, 17 years of age and they've never had an eye test. And they're coming to me for a special assessment, and which there is an eye examination with it. But it's incredible to think that 16 years of age, when a child is 16 years of age, he's never had a sight test. And there was something published a couple of years ago where it says approximately only 20% of children in Northern Ireland have a full eye test, whereby 90% of children get their teeth checked on an annual basis.
Yeah. Okay. I no doubt this is interested members, so I'm just going to go straight to Sean.
You're very welcome, Michael, Michelle and Ciara. I know what this man's been doing for years passionately, and we had a little event some time ago in the Long Gallery on this particular issue. And in that event, I listened to Michelle as well, and I think Ciara as well, and maybe I think it would be useful if we just got a wee of how this is affecting the girls in the class, what made the difference here, and maybe just a couple of lines from a parent's perspective as well.
Well, I suppose as a very forward-thinking school, we are totally committed to making the ESAG strategy for education come to place, that we will help every child achieve her full potential. So we would be quite proactive, I think, in getting many interventions in place, and that they're very appropriately matched to what the children need as we perceive it. So with all of that, we were continuing to be frustrated at how little progress a lot of these underachieving children were making. And can you imagine our shock as a school that thought that we were really on top of special needs and underachievement, and we had been deemed to be so by ETI and inspection. We'd had elements of our good practice recorded, and yet here there were 15 children out of a class of 27 that we didn't know need glasses. They didn't know they needed glasses. They weren't telling their parents that they were having problems with seeing, but they were having issues. And when the glasses came into play over the next 3 years, so it happened in P5, so we had the benefit of working with these children in P5, 6 and 7. At the start of the screening, 10 of the 15 children were underachieving in literacy. By the end of the 3 years, nobody was underachieving. And underachievement we define as having a gap of 10 marks between their standardised literacy score and their cognitive ability score. So they had all completely narrowed that gap, 10 of them. There were 9 children who were underachieving in numeracy, and at the end of year 7, 1 child was underachieving. So to me that was phenomenal. You could argue maybe the interventions were fabulous, but I know in my heart that the interventions, while they continued, we would not have had those results if the children's vision hadn't been corrected. It's phenomenal. And to us as a school now, we make a huge effort in affirming to our parents that they need to have eye tests. Parents seem to think if their children have this screening in primary 1 and they're told there are no vision problems, they think vision is nearly a static thing. If your eyes are okay in P1, they're always okay. We now have learned from Michael that your vision changes all the time. So we can inform our parents, and as a staff we're tuned into doing that. And Michael's right, his message is spreading word of mouth in our area, but that's not enough. This is something that needs to be developed strategically in Northern Ireland if our children are to benefit, because we're putting so much money into trying to correct issues that maybe that I firmly believe are due to visual difficulties. It's really quite a slap in the face.
And I don't want
for
to get into another
professionals.
debate. I cut across there, Sean, but I don't want to get into another debate. But is it possible that some of those children weren't on what would be deemed as the normal indicators that would determine for yourself as a principal that you would specifically address their individual needs?
Well, they were only in the sense they may not have been on the special needs register.
Yes, that's what
They were performing quite well, but
Yeah.
they were not performing to their potential when measured against
Right,
their
okay.
cognitive ability. So, and I can understand how they would never have been referred because they didn't know that they weren't seeing properly. You know, they were just seeing as they saw, and they thought that was their reality.
One of the other things that's relevant in Northern Ireland is that research was published a number of years ago whereby it said children in Northern Ireland are much more likely to be long-sighted than children from the rest of the UK, and you can equate long-sightedness with underachieving in reading as well. It might be worth you mentioning,
Yes.
John, about Ciara's daughter
Yes.
as well, who is one of the children from St Clair's.
Yes. Emer was a typical child in P5. I thought she was a bit scatty. She was a flibbity-jib, is another word that we would have used to describe Emer. So in consultation with Michelle, I would have sat down and tried to encourage the reading. And it was an uphill battle. Now, she was an intelligent child. She could articulate herself well. She could hold a conversation with anyone. But in her reading, it was hesitant. If there would have been a time where she may have read very smoothly, at other times she'd be falling over herself or repeating lines. But there seemed to be no reason why this was happening. One particular day, after a quick session, and I just couldn't take any more, I said, would you ever sit up there and read a book? So we all read a book like this. I observed Emer reading a book like this, up into the spine, and at this stage I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is going on here? Now, it turned out, she was seen by Michael and she had pattern glare, she had accommodation problem, which was causing her, when she looked up from the page and looked back down, her eyes couldn't find where she used to be, which was why the hesitancy was happening. We corrected that through exercises. Michael gave us flippers, which are two sets of lenses with different strengths, and within a matter of 4 to 6 weeks, that was corrected. Emer is wearing tinted glasses now because she does have the pattern glare. But again, in terms of Emer and the, I suppose, flibbity-jib, type of diagnosis or descriptive, Emer's not there anymore. Emer can sit for periods of quite substantial periods of time. She's in secondary school now and is able to keep up with the class, sit and pay full attention while in that class, and is totally engaged. I think from my point of view as a parent, I'm sitting here thinking, I've done everything for my child. She was registered with a dentist before she had teeth, but never once did I think I needed to take her to an optician's. I myself wore glasses, so I know what it is to be short-sighted. But I never thought that's not something. Emer never complained, and when they don't complain, you don't know. And again, as Michael was saying, there was Emer sitting compensating. So I was saying, in school, why was this not picked up? But she did. All her peers were reading books properly, so she tilted her head so she could read it up into the spine. So, clever kids are being missed because they're actually conforming to the way their peers learn. And as a result, Emer will never be a reader. She is a reluctant reader at best, and I've missed that for her. How many other people have we missed a whole education for, where they say, education didn't work for me, I wasn't good at school? How do you know if that's what was going on? And children don't know they've got wonky eyes, for want of a better phrase. I am not where Michael is in terms of knowing the right ways and the wrong ways, but a child sitting there thinking, this is my reality. Yeah. It's normal to feel dizzy, it's normal to have a headache, it's normal to get up and walk around, because do you know what? I'm frustrated by being made to sit and read this. So I suppose one of my things would be, and I heard the previous debate where the visual impairment seems to me to be extreme visual impairment. There is a swathe of people there who, for want of another way of looking at it, have bad teeth. Their eyes are bad. They don't know they're bad. That needs to be, whether it's a health committee thing as well, that parents need to know that from the minute those children are born, get their eyes seen, get them seen properly, and get them seen every 6 months or a year or 3 years, whatever is the recommended, because we are failing our children. Again, sort of reflecting back on that class, we had a spectrum of parents there. So we had people who were single parents, unemployed people, architects, accountants, solicitors. We all missed it. We all missed what was right in front of us. So, in terms of this, the awareness needs to be out there, and certainly in terms of word of mouth. I haven't stopped talking about this for the last 3 years to everyone who says, do you know what, my son's not getting it, my daughter's not getting it. I'm thinking, did you try a visual eye test? No, I haven't. And that's in every case, to everyone I've spoken to about this, who have said, do you know what, school's a real struggle for my child.
But it needs to be linked with education, because we have a lot of parents who will never have the wherewithal to actually arrange an appointment and take their child to that appointment. So it needs to be that the whole P1 screening programme is re-examined and becomes more appropriate.
Yeah. And would you say, Michelle, as a practitioner, sorry Sean, would you say that currently it's not appropriate?
No.
In your experience in your school, and Ciara, I'm delighted somebody has come to the committee and also identified maybe a problem that some of us have, flippity jip. And I from now on, I think there's and I'm probably the one that has it the most. Thank you for diagnosing that particular issue, Sean. So
I have really no questions, but I think this committee has lots of questions for the Department of Education, Department of Health. Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for your very refreshing briefing? It was so honest and great to listen to. I suppose my question would be directed maybe to Ciara. Earlier you heard our questioning from the departmental officials about generally how long it takes a pupil to receive assistance in school once their impairment is flagged up, and that is your presentation is so worrying those that are sort of below the radar and are not picked up. What's your view on this? You heard reassurance from Margaret that it was fairly quickly. That's not what I'm hearing through my constituency office. As we know, medical issues in schools that we're a constituency coming to us with take far too long, and they're telling me are over bureaucratic as well, and that leads to the frustrations for the parents. What's your view on this? How long it takes? Do you think it's acceptable, or do you find it's those other of you, Michelle or Ciara?
I can't really speak about it, Joanne, because the girls that Michael screened and those who had interventions from Michael's screening, I don't believe would have been ever referred to the visual impairment team.
Okay.
So it's probably Michelle would have more interaction with them whenever they are needed calling in. Certainly the girls would never have been seen by a visual impairment team, just simply because they didn't need extreme interventions. They needed glasses, they needed a few exercises.
None of these children that I see would be classified as visually impaired. These are generally children who would come under the remit of underperforming in school, and very many of them were academically bright. Very many, or quite a few of them as well, too, maybe not so bright, but they're not under the umbrella of their vision would be impaired visually, but as a definition with the Department of Health, they're not visually impaired.
Okay. Maybe Michelle about the time
Well, I have
frame.
never had experience of the Visual Impairment Support Service in my current school, but in a previous school I did, and I actually would have to say the support was fantastic, and they did put a lot of effort into supporting the teachers. But yes, that's a very specific group of children.
Okay. So your focus is on the ones that
Good
are
step
having
through.
problems or whatever, and that is very, very worrying those that don't. You know, you're very eloquently spoke about your daughter tilting her head to the side in order to read her book as well, and children will mask those signs to fit in with their peers as well. So that is very worrying. Just finally then, what changes do you feel then, and there's quite a few, need to be put in place to make things better than they are?
Well, there certainly needs to be a greater awareness of traditional eye examination. You know, there's an optometrist in every town in Northern Ireland. I think there needs to be better screening in schools, not only in P1 but possibly in P3, P4. Maybe the training needs to be better for the nurses that do the screening, and also there needs to be better communications between educators and the optical professions, optometrists, fencing opticians, orthoptists, ophthalmologists, working hand in hand with educators. I'm not aware of too many direct streams of communication between them.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You know, we have links with physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and no visual links. It's really so ironic.
It's very worrying. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Robin.
Sorry, Chair, Mark, Sean, the response by Michelle to Sean's question was...
Okay, thank you. Trevor.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. He gave us some astonishing figures there. The 16 out of 27 who had undetected. The only answer to this, I would have thought, Michael, is exactly what you're advocating, which is let's call it a compulsory proper eye test at certain stages of a child's development. Because when you say those 16 were undetected, I would say some of them were probably unadmitted. And nobody's mentioned the word vanity here, but there is an element of children at a certain age, and including adults at a certain age too, who just don't want to admit that they actually need glasses. So I can tell you of my own experience, I probably needed glasses when I was 25 and I got them when I was 35.
Well, in primary 5, they would just love to have glasses.
Yeah,
that would be a fashion
badge of
accessory.
honour,
They would
yes.
love it.
Okay, well,
So if they thought they needed them, they would ask.
I can understand the vanity issue in secondary education, not so much P5. You know, I don't. In fact, the amazing thing was I went up about 6 months later, rang Mrs. Monaghan and I said, could I go up and take a photograph because of all the children wearing glasses, just for our own sort of website. And whenever I went up, Mrs. Monaghan called all the children out of the class wearing glasses, and every single one of them was wearing glasses that day.
But your primary objective here is in terms of primary school age. So as you say, maybe the vanity thing doesn't.
Yeah.
Oh, well, fair enough. Okay. I would support what you're saying. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Pat?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I remember back at school, all of us getting eye tests, both in primary and post-primary. And it was just the chart with the letters, and you cover one eye and so on. Is that what you're talking about in terms of an eye test, or is it more substantial?
Some of the work that I do is a little bit more substantial. I'm checking the one that I mentioned there, convergence and sufficiency. It's not always done. It doesn't have to be done in a routine eye examination. When an optometrist is checking eyes, they have loads of other things to consider as well. The thing about some of these tests is, like the exercises that Ciara's daughter had to do, maybe it doesn't take that long to check it, but it takes quite a long time to explain to the parents the exercises to do, and then after that bring the child back every 2 or 3 months to make sure, 2 or 3 weeks to make sure the exercises were done.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a universal test if it was to be carried out in schools. What type of test are we talking about? And even if it was some sort of universal test, are some of the problems still not going to be missed in that type of
Well, I
test?
think some of the problems, yes, wouldn't be. Not all the problems would be got okay, but an awful lot more would be got than has been we're getting at the moment.
And who would it still be a school nurse who would carry out the test you're talking about?
Well, I'm not really sure what's the best way to do it, but I feel the testing by the school nurse needs to be improved. They need to do more tests. Out of the sample group that I took from my 100 patients, only 2 had a squint or a lazy eye out of 100, whereas almost 60% of the others were their visual dysfunctions.
And just tell me on that point, the large number who needed glasses, and it hadn't been detected up until this point. So what sort of test is being carried out at the minute? You're saying it's just for squints or lazy eyes. It's not actual. They're actual.
Yeah,
vision
and
as
also
such.
as well too, you have to accept that a child's eyes will change as they grow. Your eyes are growing as the child grows, so a child's eyes will change. So it's not only important that they're screened in P1, but the awareness has to be there from the parents and the teachers that the child needs to be seen on a regular basis, a full eye exam. And the children's eye examination is currently free for children under 16. And why they're not getting it, maybe it's our own.
I think it's because parents think if they've been checked in P1 that their eyes are okay, but that P1 eye check is much smaller than an eye check they would get if they went to an optometrist.
So, to a large extent, it's a matter of educating the population out there about the difficulties that can arise if children's eyes aren't tested.
And also making them aware that the undetected vision problems can have an effect on other areas as well, not just reading, even coordination difficulties.
I suppose there's a false sense of security that if the school nurse says you're dead on, you think, well, okay, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
That's false. That, in fact, it would be safer that the school nurse maybe didn't say anything about your vision. Then a parent would say, must get the vision done. And again, back to Michelle's point, where some parents that will never be in their psyche. So
Yeah, I think it's also important to say that whenever I did my screening in St Clair's, I didn't suggest that any of the children come to us. We did our screening and we sent our report out, and at the bottom of the report I put on it, I strongly recommend that you get your eyes examined, or I recommend that you get your eyes examined, so that everybody would do it. And as far as I can remember, I think nearly everybody got their eyes tested.
And we had a difficulty with some children making their way to you, and then you arranged that you would do follow-up work with them.
Yeah. But it's not me going in and testing and us prescribing the glasses. They went. There was a cross section. They went to. I think they probably ended up going to 4 or 5 opticians altogether in the nearly area.
Can I just ask what the cost of an eye test is routinely? I mean, it must vary a bit.
Yeah, well, an eye test for a child is free under the health services. The test that I do is different. It's a visual stress assessment, and it's really only whenever I started working in this area that I realised, we as a profession are missing so many of these children. So the assessment that I do takes an hour and a half. So there is a monetary implication for that, but it's not available through the health services. But a routine eye examination is.
But if it's free, presumably there's still a charge to the department. Or to
there is, yeah. It works out £20.
Okay, that's pretty what I was.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, Pat, I came in across you. Had you finished?
No, and I was actually coming on to the costs, and in terms of the visual stress test that you're talking about, who would assess if a child just goes along to the opticians for an eyesight test? This test that costs £20. Would an optician automatically notice if there was some other difficulty that required this visual stress test?
Not necessarily, because you very often have to ask the question: Is the child doing okay? They have to have symptoms, Is the child doing okay? Okay, some of the tests, like a muscle imbalance, there will be plenty of children with a muscle imbalance that are coping quite well. They have no symptoms in school. But if you have a child with a, let's say, a muscle imbalance, and you say to the parents any issues with school, and they say, yeah, well, the reading's not so good or whatever, then that's probably at a stage where you need to say, well, we need to explore or we need to develop further.
And are you aware that opticians would routinely ask questions like that?
Well, you sort of, the optical profession in Northern Ireland is quite a small profession, maybe 200 optometrists, and it's not every optometrist or optician that has a special interest in children. And the awareness between the connection between underperformance and in school and vision probably isn't explored enough, and that's why I would like to have done a pilot study. There's quite a lot of research published where, let's say, you can connect a convergence insufficiency with underperformance in school, but the unique thing with what I would like to do is that the research is driven by educators, so they're picking out the children who are underperforming, and then I suppose we're finding out, is there a visual reason why that child is underperforming.
Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Trevor. Yeah.
Just, Michael, I think you're being a bit modest on behalf of your own profession, frankly. There seems to be 3 levels of tests here. You've got a squint, lazy eye, traditionally done by a nurse, a normal eye test done by a normal optometrist, and then this visual stress test, which you and others can perform. But you did say that, diplomatically, that if proper eye tests were to be done by nurses in schools, that there would be some extra training involved.
Yeah.
Is it really possible to train a school nurse to that extent, given the equipment that would be needed for it?
I don't think so. I personally think it should be in the hands of the optical profession.
Yeah, you're the experts. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Robin.
It's just a very short one that follows on from Trevor's point there. We're now seeing major growth in the multinational chains of opticians and so on. They seem to me more concerned about selling you glasses than maybe correcting any defects. How would you, if you were, how would you get your local optician, who may well adopt what you're saying, but how would you convince the major chains that this is something they should be involved in?
Yeah, it's very difficult. Generally, multiples are they're under constraints of seeing X amount of patients per day. Very often with children, you need to spend an awful lot more time. And if you don't spend the time, you don't find out. If you don't ask the questions, you don't know. There would be quite a lot of children that I would see that simple tests have been missed in the past, and it's not through negligence or anything like that. It's just that maybe it's not part of the routine eye examination. The one in particular that was mentioned about pattern glare. Pattern glare, unfortunately, it's a subjective test. It's not a measured test. So very often you don't see it in an optician's practice, but it is acknowledged that 20% of the population have pattern glare difficulties. Like ironing stripy shirts or that sort of thing. So a child with pattern glare difficulties will find small font quite stressful to look at.
Is pattern glare what you sometimes see on TV? Somebody wearing a jacket like Michelle, for instance.
Yeah.
And okay.
But that can manifest itself in reading when a child goes from picture books to rows and rows and rows of the same font.
And the department has invested heavily in the new SEN Continuing Professional Development Project, the 3-year project, and it is aimed at tackling the difficulties that a lot of these children are presenting with. So huge money has been invested in that and training teachers into how to remediate. And maybe we need to just pull back a wee bit and say, well, we'll try the glasses first. You know, I've no doubt that the other won't continue to still be of huge benefit, but there could be a more fundamental reason for the problems for lots of these children.
But as well too, you know, from a financial point of view, I would feel it's could be saving the department's money. You know, so much money is maybe spent on peripatetic help or classroom assistance for particular children that are having difficulties, and maybe in some cases, and in fact, well, in many cases, a very simple solution and not an expensive solution.
Thank you. I think you've really shocked us all by giving us I don't think I've been at a committee in all my time here where I've had something so fundamentally simple that we can resolve if we tackle it. I had written, when I'd read the papers last night on pilot study, because I'm so used to us having pilot studies and they don't really achieve anything. Whereas here, I get the feeling we need a pilot study, not in every single library board, so that they learn and get the benefits and see. So you've made really good presentation today, and just a huge, huge thank you.
Thanks
for coming here, showing it to us. And
Sir, could I ask one short question? Have you had any contact with the department about carrying out a pilot study?
No, a number of years ago, I did I produced a booklet on the results that I found, and I did send it off to the Department of Education, and I got a thank you from the Minister at the time, and I think it was passed from there to the Health Committee, and it's probably, you know, nothing was done about it, but you know, I haven't approached any of the boards. It's very hard, you know, when you're in your own practice and you're busy, and you know, to know how to source the funding. However, recently I've got backing from my professional body, and they would part fund help. So very often, if you're supported by one body, it might be gives you access to other areas.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, I think thank you, Michelle, Michael, Cara. Thank you. I mean, that has been really enlightening, and we'll now.
Thanks very much.
It's on our shoulders to try and push it. So thank you.
Okay, very well. Can I take my visual aids back?
Not my glasses.
That's a very nice jacket, Michelle.
So, Chair, in sum then?
In summary, I think we have to must write to the department highlighting this, and I think we want a response as quickly as we can back.
Chair, do you want to seek information on the role of school nurses? I'm not aware of, do all schools have school nurses now? I'm surprised by the reference to it, and also just to seek the department's comment on the P1 universal screening. Is it an eye test? What are their views on what's been said? And what advice do they provide to parents and schools, you know, around the identification of children with degenerative eye conditions that have been talked about? So additionally then, I think you want to
Is the trouble, Chair, not that they're not actually identifying the problems, so they're just, everything's okay, or there is a very obvious defect that they then report back? How would the school nurse, or I didn't think there were school nurses any longer. How would the school nurse actually know? You know, there isn't a problem as far as the school nurse is concerned.
I think what they were asking for is everyone having an eye test.
Yeah.
And that takes us past the school nurse. I mean, the school nurse might be the way, if that exists at the moment, to pick it up until we get this in place. But Jonathan, you had.
Yeah, the Chair, this runs to the root of the difficulty around this situation. You know, when the department was here, I tried to indicate to you is that, you know, despite the rosy picture that's painted, the reality is it's nothing like that at all. It's not like that, because the department has changed the responsibility for identifying this from medical professionals, as we witnessed here, to the teachers and the teaching profession, who do not have the expertise to do this. There isn't a nurse in every school. In fact, I would struggle to identify a school in my own constituency that actually has a nurse. So you don't even have that level of profession there. What you have is your SENCOs in the school, your special educational need teacher with responsibility for that. Now, despite all of the training, and most of the training is actually around autism, ADHD, all of those things, you know, they're not medical professionals. And then, you know, whatever they pass on to the actual teachers, and they do try, with the best will in the world, we cannot expect a teacher to be a medical professional and identify someone within the class who has got visual impairment issues that haven't been picked up to that stage. But unfortunately, the way the system is at the minute, that is what's expected. And we could all quote examples time and time again of where that has failed. And that's the difficulty we have here. So if you're going to question anything, we've got to question the policy of the department, putting the responsibility on the teachers to identify medical issues.
But we also want to ask what they're going to do about it in light of what we've heard today. Sorry.
And I mean, I think probably the first step is, you know, to advocate, the committee to advocate a pilot scheme to be set up. You know, whatever work has been done up to now, it's obviously too small a study to put any sort of great emphasis on. And it would be useful also if the research department could dig up some research in this field, and whether there's any international studies or even...
I get the feeling the department need to meet the same three people.
Yeah,
really,
I agree with you.
Really
I agree
learn,
with you,
learn the points, get across to realise how urgent it is, and then what it could affect me all the way through. Okay.
So, in sum then, members, you want to forward these papers to the Committee for Health and Social Services and Public Safety for their information. Do you also want to ask the Department for Health, Social Services and Public Safety about the uptake of under-16 eye tests? Because apparently they're free. That is there's a very low uptake. That might tell a tale. Additionally then, so you're writing to the Department, advocating a pilot study and further work on this, maybe seeking clarification on the policy. Are there school nurses? I think we'll have the answer. What is the P1 universal check supposed to be? Is it supposed to be a full eye test? As indicated that is not the case, but to see what the department claims their policy is in this regard, and also what their, if it is the case that their policy is teachers are to identify these medical issues, what support do they give to teachers to do that, if any, if that is indeed the case. And yes,
Would they look at a pilot scheme?
And a pilot scheme, though not necessarily that pilot scheme, maybe there's some other work engaged. And also, you want me to ask Assembly Research if they have something on this, on, say, the issue of vision and underachievement in schools, because that's an education issue, whereas I would say poor eyesight would be more of a health issue, really.
Okay.
If that's okay, members.
Okay. Okay. Okay, if we can move on then to correspondence, and it's at pages 100 to 291. We've got 18 items provided under correspondence.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
you can't do it as quick as that.
You could actually
we
just
could-
go by the covering note.
well, I had something that I wanted to raise, but I think has none of you got anything you want to raise. On page 104, members, the first items in correspondence are from the Education and Library Boards and relate to area planning for controlled schools. The Western and South Eastern Library Boards have working groups populated by transfers or other controlled school representatives. The North Eastern and the Belfast refer such matters to the Education Committee of these boards, which appear to include elected members. The SEELB has no controlled school subgroup and uniquely appears to have no channel for elected representatives to impact on controlled school area planning. So I suggest that we write to the South Eastern Education Library Board and suggest that it amends its practices. in this regard in line with other ALBs. Agreed? Okay. Page 135, you'll see correspondence from Altram, the Northern Ireland Early Years Education Irish Immersion Support Organisation, providing further information on funding arrangements for Irish medium organisations through the North-South Irish Language Body. I suggest that we request commentary from the Department of Culture, Arts and Leisure on how IME early years support is to be managed in Northern Ireland, and from the Department of Education on the change to the remit of SENA G, if any. Agreed? Page 137, members, at 137 you'll see a response from the Department to concerns raised by primary school principals in respect to end-of-key stage assessment and levels of progression, including references to related industrial action. I suggest that we seek a departmental briefing on progress regarding levels of progression. Agreed? At 148, you'll see correspondence from the Department on seatbelts in school buses. All Education and Library Board transport now has seatbelts, but only around 2/3 of Translink transport has seatbelts. I suggest we write to Translink and seek a timeline for all of its buses to have seatbelts. Okay, agreed. Pages 153 to 194. You'll see a number of items of correspondence relating to our recent consideration of STEM issues. For example, GCSE STEM entries have increased slightly. The STEM engagement profile of all primary schools will be produced by March 2015, and the Department of Education is to review primary, post-primary information sharing regulations. I suggest we note these for the time being, consider them again in the autumn, following the anticipated publication of the ETI report on the world around us. Agreed? Agreed. Page 195. You'll see a response from the Department following the Committee's suggestion that we should consider making a bid for a second STEM bus. The Department has advised the North Eastern Education Library Board would be in the lead for such a bid, and I suggest that we write to the Board to request that it give consideration to a capital bid for another STEM bus. Agreed? 207, you'll find correspondence from the Committee for the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister asking if the Committee for Education is reviewing underachievement among Protestant boys following the publication of the most recent BEAST monitoring report from the Community Relations Council. As you're aware, the Committee has already received briefings on TIMS, PEARLS and the NISRA GCSE A-level data in the CRC report, and that we are to receive a briefing on the 14th of May on the longitudinal study in the Taking Boys Seriously report. Are we content to reply to OFM-DFM in these terms to the committee? Agreed. Okay. At page 249, you'll find an invitation from Stranmillis and St Mary's University College to the launch of the executive summary of the Credit Project on Wednesday, 7th of May. This project covers diversity and equality training for teachers and makes recommendations for enhanced CPD for teachers across educational phases. The executive summary has been appended for information, and can I ask you to treat it as confidential until the launch next week? And can I suggest that we write to the Department and seek its comments on the relevant recommendation? At page 280, there's a response from the Department of Education in respect of contingency fund payments to schools in surplus. DE indicates that funding authorities have a responsibility to exercise a challenge function based on the individual circumstances of the schools when allocating contingency funds. Suggest we write to each of the library boards and ask whether now or previously they have exercised the challenge function by denying contingency funds to schools in surplus. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, in the tabled items you can see an invitation from the Probation Board of Northern Ireland to a drop-in event today in the Long Gallery. This was previously emailed to members. We content to note. Agreed. Okay, and the rest we will do as noted and agreed in correspondence, unless there's anything anyone else wants to raise. Okay. Forward work programme. The draft forward work programme is at pages 293 to 295, detailing meetings between now and the summer recess. Members, please be aware we have a clash on the 28th of May 2014. We plan to go to Antrim and visit Every School a Good School TV and the RSPB in Greenmount. This clashes with an annual department event for outstanding and very good schools, which you'll see at page 284. Are we content to give our apologies to DE for this event and proceed as planned to Greenmount? I don't think one of us should go in one direction.
All of members wish to do that.
I think it should be up to people here to decide which they want to go to.
Okay.
Happy with that?
So if members would let me know if they're going to go to attend the department's event. So the invitation is at page 284. This is 20th of May. This was on last year, if members will recall. It's the schools that have got outstanding or very good from ETI and have a big event for them. I think there are probably some from all of your constituencies. Not that should be a consideration, but I'm sure there are. But that's why I was conscious of the clash. So I guess we will continue as planned at Antrim, and if members want to go to the DE event, if they'd let me know and I'll tell the department you're coming.
Do we tell other MLAs?
And that is for the department, actually. I'm not sure whether it's been it's the department's event. They've sent it to the committee. I think it's for them to determine who they invite, actually.
Okay, well maybe you could tell your colleagues if you think there's a school there. So, okay. Right, any other business?
As AOB now, yeah. Could I say a word about the St Mary's Brother situation, Danny?
Yeah.
Just really, they came to your office the office meet us the other day. The Minister has agreed to meet the Northwestern Education Action Group and Brala, Mary's Brala, and some of ourselves, certainly. But could we write to him and ask him to arrange that with a lot of urgency?
Okay.
Because the situation there is it's a classic we don't know scenario and self-fulfilling prophecy and all the rest of it. So I think the members that were there the other day agreed we'd ask the committee to write to the Minister and arrange that as a matter of urgency.
We're also asking for the relevant cross-border report as well. Isn't there a study to?
I missed part of the meeting, so I'm not too sure about that, but that would be useful, yeah.
It's just...
And the other thing was that whenever CCMS in the person of Jerry Lundy met the Northwestern group, he agreed to write to the department to explore the situation around teachers being allocated to provide assistance in delivering the full curriculum at a school like St Mary's Brala, and that one in particular. Would like to know if the department received such a letter and what their reaction has been.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that bit.
So, Chair,
we've got 3 actions.
So we are seeking the cross-border study. Then, additionally, is that
well, that's what they want, because that's their future.
Okay, so that's what the committee's agreed, Mr. Chair. Okay.
You happy if I push for that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Anything else? Okay. Private session. Gosh, we've got a long read up here.